Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Alien versus Predator Galaxy podcast, the original Alien and Predator podcast. This is regular host Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks, and joining me is my fellow Colonial Marine searching for one of our lost brothers in arms,
Adam Zeller, aka RidgeTop.
and making his podcast debut. If you've seen him on our Alien RPG. Was it Chris's custom? It was Chris's custom phalanx campaign, wasn't it? Yeah. If you watch our live streams, you'll have seen him on that episode. But yes, this is his podcast debut. Is
Still Collating, also known as Greg. Hi, everyone.
And also joining is a returning community guest. She's always there on the live streams for us and giving us feedback and commenting on stuff as well. So I like to get Sarah on the podcast and also have a natter with us on the books. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, yes, it's Sarah, Bishop's biggest fangirl.
Yes. Well, for our audio listeners, what shirt are you wearing?
I am wearing a not bad for a human t-shirt, and it is accessorized with some Lance Bishop dog tags.
Oh, nice.
Sarah taking it very seriously today.
Focus.
Did you get those dog tags from Etsy?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I could have sworn I saw something like that there.
Yeah, they're transparent ones, so
Mhm.
they're kind of similar. And I did check, and the numbers match. So
Nice.
They did do some licensed ones. I think they only did Hicks and Hudson though. So you can get a lot of cool sort of custom dog tags like that from Etsy. I know the boys and girls at Aliens Legacy, you know, the Colonial Marine costumers, they used to do a run of stuff before this was really common. I keep meaning to get myself a pair as well, you know, actually. Just have my own serial number made up and slapped on there. That was something they used to do. So what are we talking today, Adam?
We are talking the new Aliens book from Titan called Bishop, the second book from them named after a character from Aliens.
Indeed, and the fifth Aliens branded book, I believe.
Yeah, because most of theirs are Alien.
Alien, yeah. So this is written by T.R Napper. It was released in, I think, October or December, sometime at the end of last year. Adam says no. We should probably say latest. We are a little behind on this one. Took me a little bit of time to finally read it, to be fair.
Yeah, likewise.
And that has been a little bit of apathy on my part for the expanded universe, thanks to some of Marvel and Titan's efforts over the last year. I'm very disappointed to say that it has sapped that little bit of enthusiasm from me. But, well, no, you know, and the synopsis sapped a little bit of enthusiasm from Bishop for me. You know what? I'll read that. I'll read that synopsis now. The US CSS Patna has been found. Although the synthetic Bishop asked to be shut down forever, his creator has other plans. Michael Bishop seeks the xenomorph knowledge stored in the android's mind and brings Bishop back to life. But for what reason? No longer an employee of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, Michael tells his creation that he seeks to advance medical research for the benefit of humanity. Yet where does he get the resources needed to advance his work? With whom do his new allegiances lie? The US CSS Patna is pursued by Colonial Marines Captain Marcel Apone, commander of the Il Conde? Yeah, I think that was how you pronounce it, wasn't it? The Il Conde.
Il Conde.
And younger brother of Master Sergeant Alexander Apone, one of the casualties of the doomed mission to LV-426. Also on his trail are the dog catchers, commandos employed by Weyland-Yutani. There are many who would profit from Lance Bishop's intimate knowledge of the deadliest creatures in the galaxy. You know what? When that synopsis was first shared, I was entirely on board with it until it mentioned Marcel Apone. That's when
Same.
I threw a towel against the wall and went, I'm sick of this Star Wars syndrome that Aliens seems to be going down. So that did also create a little bit extra apathy towards this book on my part. Apathy that was misplaced. So let's get into those initial sort of reactions to the book. I was very dubious and not enthusiastic about reading Bishop, and it was in part because I'm sick of that Star Wars syndrome. How many times do Vasquez's relations have to find and fight an alien? Dark Horse sort of run Amanda Ripley into the ground. Isolation was Amanda Ripley at the best, and it was a core integral part of how that game worked so well from an emotional and narrative point of view. But she was misused and overused, and it became not so interesting anymore. Vasquez was okay. It wasn't great. Aftermath was meh. So, of all the legacy characters that I have felt would be worth revisiting, Michael Bishop was one of them. Morse was one of them. Bishop himself was never one I ever really thought about, but makes sense. And I regret being put off the book because I actually really, really enjoyed this. It was very well written. It was fun to explore Bishop a bit more and to explore Michael Bishop. I did wonder a little bit throughout the book as to his intentions. It might have took a little bit of a, I don't want to say obvious turn, but the turn was coming. A turn was coming, but it still worked pretty well in my opinion. Marcel Apone made sense within the context of the story of the book. I didn't think he was absolutely necessary, but he's not the character we focus on really when it comes to the Marines. It's a different private under his command, and I think that works particularly well. And yeah, Napper was a good writer. I very much enjoyed it. There are a few niggles I have, which we can talk about specifically later. But I think a 7 or an 8 out of 10 for me. Adam, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think I kind of had the same reaction as you when I initially saw the synopsis. I think it was more of just a groan through the whole thing, though. Beyond just the Apone connection, I was like, are we bringing Bishop back? Like, what? I was like, we already have this story from Colonial Marines, and that's the canon one. So do we really need this? But I was actually surprised too. I thought it was a very entertaining read. I do feel like it got a bit jumbled at times, and I felt some of the dialogue was a bit unnatural. Um, so I had my issues with it. I thought some of Michael Bishop's motivations seemed a little all over the place. Um, and you have the trait of like the villain trying to convince the person who knows better that he's not a villain when it's obvious he is. So, like, yes, I had my issues with it, but overall, I liked the characters, especially that of the new Marine recruit, Carrie. I think she was a really interesting character. But it surprised me because I thought that the book would be more focused on her, but it kind of jumped around between different characters a lot. And as I was reading it and listening to the narration at the same time, they had like a different narrator for each of the perspectives, which was kind of interesting. Sometimes we see that in anthologies, but I hadn't seen it just used for different perspectives before. So that was kind of cool. But overall, I think I'd kind of lie right around where you do with my score, Aaron, like a 7 or an 8, maybe leaning more towards a 7. I enjoyed it. It's worth a read for sure as a fan. Pleasantly surprised. I wouldn't say it's like great, but I'd say it's pretty good.
How about yourself, Greg?
Well, I came from a similar perspective as most of you, was kind of tired with the reuse of characters, especially as we said, Bishop not only was already reused in Aliens Colonial Marines. Bishop also appeared in the short story for Bug Hunt anthology. So we already had enough of Bishop, and nobody was really crying for more of Bishop. Agreed that Michael Wayland could actually Michael Bishop here. I don't think he's actually related to being Wayland anymore, if I remember. But yeah, he was also used in Colonial Marines, and we've seen other interpretations. But he was potentially interesting. I was also on board of seeing more of him, and I also always agree that Morse was somebody who never was explored after the movie and had potential there. Glad that they appeared in the book, though it was a really minor part. Yeah. Also, just that first half somewhat had me interested, but yeah, when I heard that a brother of Apone, yeah, that brought back all of the recent family tie-ins, as Aaron said, the Star Wars feeling. I would also say maybe kind of even a Marvel type feeling where everybody knows each other, people keep on coming back into these roles, and there was some familiarity fatigue, if I can call it like that, since we've had so many appearances from a man that we've also had a lot of appearances from Zula Hendricks, who was an original character created from the comics, but she was also then reused quite a bit in a lot of comics, and then a couple of novels, and then having Vasquez, and it all felt kind of too much, and the synopsis alone turned me off as well, especially because the last trilogy of books wasn't that entertaining to me as well. So I was coming in with some trepidation, and the biggest problem was that I came in with a kind of negative perspective there, especially when some people on different sites read the book right away, and then when they expressed their negative opinion about it by displaying some dialogue that was in the book, when you hear those bits and pieces, it does sound very, very, very bad. It can sound like a pretty strange story. But then after hearing more and more praise for the book, I was like, maybe I should give this a chance, and was very, very surprised at how much I liked it, because I didn't think that I could change my perspective when I already had some of the information beforehand. So it was quite interesting to see how the writer was able to incorporate some elements that on paper sound bad but were presented so well that it got me very immersed, and I was really, really, really surprised, and I've liked this book more than I've liked the novels in 2 or 3 years. Well, since after Alex White's novels and Phalanx, from the Titan novels, I would put this right after that. So yeah, for me, it would be an 8 out of 10. Short.
Sarah, last but not least.
Yeah, so not to repeat everyone else's sentiments, I think it goes without saying that the familial connections caused a quite ostentatious eye roll on my behalf. But I was. Can you hear that noise? I'm so sorry. I'll close the window in a moment. I was really surprised. I was glad that I stuck with it. I wasn't expecting two bishops. So two for the price of the one cheered me up. I was really glad to see Michael Bishop come in as well as Lance Bishop. And I think the story, I agree, was very well written. I thought it was well executed, apart from a couple of scenes, but we can come back to those later. I liked the way they portrayed Bishop. It felt like Aliens Bishop. You know, Greg was talking a moment ago about Book Hunt. I really, really disliked the story in Book Hunt. I didn't like this suggestion that something about Bishop was different, but I was glad that they explored it in the way in which they did, albeit slightly over the top, maybe, through this story. Apone, I thought, was utilized mostly really well. I thought the opening battle was brilliant, one of the best that I've heard in the books for a while. And I also really liked the way in which Android memories were explained, how that fed into the uniqueness of Bishop, and how that then served as a parallel of choice as to whether it was that he was unable to unlock memories, about how it was explained that the memories of the xenomorph that he would have protected from anybody was so closely entwined with the memories of his friends and the Marines, there was an urge for him to unlock them. I thought that was really smart. I liked that. What wasn't I fun of? Morse. I was glad to see him back, but I spent pretty much the whole time reading his narration with gritted teeth.
We eye rolling at the stereotypical British.
Gordon Bennett, like, yeah, that was one of the reasons. I think the other reason was that he was just poorly used. And I think within the film, he's shown to have layers, you know, through what he does to Ripley and what for her, and what he goes through to enable her to do the right thing. And I think then he's just kind of stereotyped into this Cockney rhyming moron. I I wasn't a fan of that. There were too many characters for me. I ended up getting dizzy. I think we have 6 Marines that we have names and we talk about. There's 3 Vietnamese, 1, maybe 2 Chinese, and then the bishops and the officers. I was just then with all of these unnamed in all these different locations, I thought there was a bit too much done. But I kind of understand why. And even as a Bishop fan, if I had to hear one more reference of who's holding his belly, I was going to chuck the book across the room. But all in all, look, I really enjoyed this book. I was saying to Aaron earlier, it was a bit strange rating this book. The first time round when I read this, I would have said it was an 8.5. The second time, I'd have put it at 7. It just wasn't vibing with me. And then the third time round, I was back up again. So I think I gave Infernals Fall a 7. I think I would give this an 8.
And you read it 3 times before this podcast. It's impressive.
See the t-shirt, know the attitude.
There were days when I would do stuff like that. I mean, not just for the podcast, you know, just enjoying a book. You just want to crack on and read it again. You know, the first time I read any Alien books, it was an omnibus of Earthhive and Nightmare Asylum, and I literally just turned the book over again once I finished Nightmare Asylum and just started reading Earthhive all over again. Sometimes it just happens. And there's nothing wrong with that, Adam. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I will attempt to do a brief summary of the kind of things that happen in the book, as apparently people do actually listen to these reviews without having read the books that we're talking about. This will not be exhaustive. It will not be entirely accurate. But I personally find it boring when I listen to people recount these things. It's why I struggle to get the law videos done, to be honest, because I get bored working on them. But so the book is basically it opens with Apone and his squad of Marines, or what remains of his squad of Marines, shall I say, because he had to leave some behind a peace conference or something like that, to be allowed to go on this mission to track down Michael Bishop, because they were specifically after the remains of Lance Bishop of the android. And a cool 0G battle ensues on the Patna, and we're introduced to our main Marine, who is Private Kari, who is another Aussie main character like T.R Napper. So that's where the stereotype British comes in, Sarah. The author's an Aussie. She's a rookie. very green, doing it to get the benefits of serving in the Marines for her family, because Australia gets fucked in the EU of recent.
What was the
Um,
other book that we were like, what happened to Australia? And
Inferno's
then,
4,
oh, that's right. Yeah. So
because
this kind of filled
Clara's
in
an
the blank.
Aussie, and oh shit, I forgot. Philippa. Philippa is a New Zealander, if I remember rightly. But yeah, it's expanded. It all comes from the RPG. I think they expand a line from
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Earth Hive. Yeah, which Greg was going to point out there. I assume they expand a line from Earth Hive about is it the food riots or the food somethings in
Food
Australia?
Wars. Yeah, it was some silly name like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had some Australian authors expanding on that in their entries, and it's been really interesting. I do I do feel for the Australian characters in the expanded lore at the minute, because they are absolutely fucking devastated. But yeah, so this Kari has joined the Marines to get the um, benefits for her family of serving, and she serves with distinction. She gets more benefits for her family, and they don't have to live in what sounds like fucking
Smaller.
refugee camps. Yeah, squalor camps. But Apone's driving forces, of course, finding out what's happened to his brother and recovering Bishop. But then we also find out that Bishop's been recovered by I'm gonna say Bishop so many fucking times. Bishop the android has been recovered by Michael Bishop the human, and his consciousness, his memories, his brain has been copied into a new buffer, apparently buffer and more advanced model of Bishop, and he is trying to convince Bishop the android to give up his knowledge of the xenomorphs, ostensibly to further medical science, because Michael Bishop has defected from Weyland Yutani. He is not aboard the partner. We don't know where he is for most of the book, but Bishop the android will not give him this knowledge, because I thought this was interesting. This idea of the military, because Bishop was a military model, his knowledge that was proprietary to his military activity was partitioned off in his mind, and was secret in that fashion, in that technical of a fashion. And I found that idea quite interesting. And to be honest, that they simply couldn't just download, copy, go check the directories out on the terminals and go for the memories. I quite like that. I thought that was a very logical and sensible thing for them to do in this. But also, as Sarah alluded to, Bishop's memories of Ripley are entwined in the mission to LV-426. And he only remembers having a fondness for her, and sort of the death moments. So he doesn't really remember why he has these feelings of friendship towards Ripley, and that was an interesting dynamic and a very interesting way to drive his motivations to also want to kind of give in and give Michael this knowledge. So a lot of the book is based on that philosophical back and forth between Michael and between Bishop as to why he should give this information over. And it eventually turns out that Michael has removed, Asimov's rules from Bishop the android. He's got his free will and his choices. It is within his choice to give this knowledge over. So a lot of the book is about convincing that transfer of knowledge. We also have a ship of Vietnamese smugglers who are captured by the. It would be wrong to say the UPP, because that's not really what's happening. They are captured by a Chinese warship who are trying to politically maneuver themselves in a way that they can secede from the UPP, which again I thought was another really interesting dynamic, because we didn't then end up with this very stereotypical communist Russians in space kind of way of the origins of the UPP. So that was fun to explore as well. But yeah, these Vietnamese crew are captured, and they are used to breed aliens aboard this Chinese warship for the purposes of experimentation. And what we eventually find out is that Michael Bishop defected to this Chinese branch of the UPP, and he's the one heading up their alien research. He's on board their new flagship, and it all sort of coalesces with it apparently being Wayland Yutani had manufactured this spaceship. So the Wayland Yutani agent aboard the Il Conde with Apone was aware of them and helped them track them down. We then get a boarding action to recover everybody. Of course, the aliens get loose because I have to say this is my big problem with the novel is this shit containment that the Chinese have for the aliens and that Bishop developed for them. Whether this was intentionally stupid or not on Bishop's part, I don't know. But prior to that, Michael Bishop sort of forces Bishop the android's hand by creating some sabotage in the research, resulting in the death of some of the researchers. Well, one of the researchers, sorry, should I say, which then sort of forces Bishop the android's hands to go, yeah, I don't want to be responsible for death because you don't have this information that I'm forcing you to relearn, and gives it up. And then, of course, that's when the turn happens. Michael Bishop's an evil bad guy who wants Bishop's sensory memories of the Queen's pheromones at the time they met on the ship, which is interesting. We can talk about that later as well. Then, yeah, obviously Michael Bishop's the bad guy, and the Marines boarding managed to meet up and save him. There's a survivor from the Vietnamese crew who also makes it out, who meets up with some of the Marines, and everybody gets off and survives. Well, not everybody. The main characters get off and survive.
A lot of the Marines died.
Yeah.
A lot of the other crew die as well. Most
Yeah.
actually die.
I was like, the body count in this story is high.
Yeah. All but one of the Vietnamese, all but one of the all the
All-
Chinese. Yeah, all the
I think they say there are
doesn't
some.
make it.
I think they say there are some survivors, but they're nameless survivors, or the ones you know the name of are dead.
The main
Is it the XO?
the second, yeah. The XO, I think she made it. She escaped with some of the.
She gets grabbed. She gets grabbed in the escape pod.
Yeah, she gets. Just as they're getting in.
Yeah.
There's a xenomorph hiding in the lance, right? As they're about to evacuate.
I think she's at the door. Pods. She's at the door covering it, and then gets yanked out before she gets a chance to join them.
Oh yeah, that was her.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure where the alien was hiding, but
well, it was dark. It was hiding anywhere. That's the way it works. And of course, Morse is also in captivity aboard. What was the name of the Chinese ship? I can't remember.
It's
Xinjiang.
Yeah, that.
Okay, well, we'll have a look in a bit. But yeah, so Morse was captive aboard that ship as well. When I actually got to Morse, I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting this. And yes, even though he's very much Cockney, stereotype Cockney, I was like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah, you should have heard the audiobook narration for him. It was fun.
Was it a British narrator, or was it just laying it on thick?
I think I don't think it was a British narrator, but he did a good job on Morse, I thought. I don't think it was overly Cockney. I mean, it certainly wasn't like Colony War, here, but it was good. I thought it was good.
No, I liked having him. I mean, I see where Sarah's coming from. I'll be honest. I did eye roll a little bit at the very stereotypical Cockney governor kind of bloke, but no, I still kind of enjoyed his musings with Bishop and trying to bring Lance Bishop down into reality as to the treatment from Michael Bishop. And I normally hate dialogue callbacks, but when he was obsessed with having some ice cream, I was kind of like, you know what, this is funny. It doesn't feel too. It's not pulling me out the story like when some fucking random bloke from America quotes Dutch in in The Predator. So it kind of felt on brand, and I got a smile out of it. But
Oh, okay. So here's my while we're talking about this and Morse, here's my burning question. When Morse gave Bishop the name of the novel that he was writing, of where he had noted down his experience as of the xenomorph, when he mentioned that title, did you go, "Oh, love what you did there," or did your eyes roll until they fell out of your head?
what about it being named Space Beast? Why did that make your eyes roll?
It's so close to kind of the original name of the Alien film
Well,
and what it was
that's the point.
important.
Yeah.
It's always
I
been that way.
Him
Sarah.
writing Space Beast has been a thing for like a while.
Since A.C. Crispin's novelization of Resurrection.
Okay.
So yeah, space. I loved it because I love Space Beast. It has, and it's part of the reason why I've always wanted Morse to come back. So ever since, when was Resurrection? 95, 96? So ever since,
97. Yep.
so ever since that novelization, and knowing that, at least in some part of lore, that he'd gone off and written this book, I was like, there's some stuff left there for Morse. I always kind of envisioned a Jurassic Park 3 situation where somebody tricked him into going along as an advisor on a mission, or kidnapped him for the same purposes, and then he gets there and he does what fucking Alan does in Jurassic Park 3 and goes, "I was on the different island, you fucking idiots." Kind of situation.
I would
to
love that.
But he's shown up a lot more over the last, oh god, it's gonna depress me now, nearly decade, because we had reference to it in the Weyland-Yutani report, which albeit I was actually really disappointed with, because the Weyland-Yutani report comes with a pullout that is Space Beast, and it is in that book, in the Weyland-Yutani report, that tiny little thing that is about 4 pages long, something like that, Greg, is supposedly the entirety of Space Beast. And I was really disappointed with that. I was like, this should have been framed around being an excerpt, something like that. But then I love it in the RPG because I think it's a fucking brilliant shorthand way to have all your characters be aware of the alien and not have to play that horrid game of, I don't know what the aliens are. I've got to put this meta knowledge outside my mind here. So I like it in the RPG as that shorthand. But yeah, I'm guessing. So, Sarah, you didn't know about that. You didn't know about that history. Now
No,
that
so I knew the stop, but I almost thought it was a joke because it was this tiny booklet that was. It just felt like a throwaway thing, from the Weyland-Yutani report. I'm not familiar with the RPG, and I don't think I've read that treatment of Resurrection. So need to get my hands on that and have a read of it. But yeah, for me, the only association I had was the Weyland-Yutani report, which was awful. So for me, I was just like, oh, no, 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 no. No, thank you. But now I have more references. I can go and read and enjoy them. But maybe on the 4th attempt of reading Aliens Bishop, because I will read it again, I will appreciate it more.
That's fair. I personally actually prefer the novelization of Resurrection over the film. So if you haven't read the novel before, it could be a nice little treat for you. See what you think.
Does it have the garden scene?
No,
Oh, that's too bad.
not that I remember anyway. Adam, what did? Sorry, Adam.
Sorry.
Okay, let me give a clean cut here. Adam, what did you think of Morse and Space Beast in?
I liked his appearance here personally. I thought he was a fun character, and enjoyed his interactions with Bishop and the rest of the Marines near the end. Um, I was, yeah, earlier on I was confused because Michael Bishop says he attacked him. I was like, that wasn't Morse, that was 85 that attacked him. So it was just another deception by Michael Bishop towards his synthetic son. But no, it was cool to see him. I was surprised just like that they wanted the information he had so much. I mean, like, yeah, he saw the alien running around, like that's really it. Like, it's not like he held some deep secrets of the creature or whatever.
Well, at
Um,
this point, there were no live survivors of an alien encounter.
yeah, I guess that's true. I guess there would be some value there. Um, but yeah, it was I enjoyed his presence, and I thought it was funny how he was talking about um getting tortured was like a creative inspiration for him in terms of like writing Space Beast and stuff. So I very much enjoyed like him being all excited about his book and everything. And we did get to see a bit of his backstory. He talked about dismantling old ships and went into getting screwed over by the corporations again, as we see a lot in the Alien universe. So yeah, I liked his appearance personally.
Greg, any thoughts?
Well, let's just say it. Morse was basically he was the comedy relief at the end of the book, but I do like his inclusion, and yeah, there were some bits that maybe felt a bit corny, but when we mentioned he giving the name of the book Space Beast, I love how Bishop instantly puts him down, saying like that's not very original name, and Morris gets all offended. So I thought that was kind of funny, and he was presented in a charming way. I at least felt. And one of the topics that I wanted to bring up later was that dialogue between Morris and Bishop at the start when they were talking about does Michael value androids or people, and then I do like the background of his history that Morris showed, and it does raise some interesting questions whether how much of the workspace is automated, how much can be done by the recent entries of robots such as Working Joes, and how much is still done by cheap labor. So I thought that brought a lot of potentially very interesting subjects that can be explored further in short stories, RPGs, and novels. That's a lot of interesting ideas there. So
It
Yeah,
felt very.
I was just gonna say you reminded me of that bit, Greg, where pretty quickly Morse puts Bishop in a logic chokehold, which is surprising in terms of like Bishop very much believed at this point that, oh, Michael Bishop cares for his synthetic creations. He wants them to have more rights. He wants them to have more independence. And Morse, kind of turns the tables on him, saying, well, he doesn't even care about humanity. Like how, and here's all this evidence for it that I've experienced and I've lived. Like, you really think he cares about synthetics that much more? So I thought that was an interesting conversation they had.
And I thought it felt very prescient to the discussions around AI at the moment. That kind of is automation really the right word for the use of AI at the minute?
Yes, because that is going to be a big thing.
But I mean, a lot of it tends to be around the morals, not necessarily, the kind of concerns that perhaps the workforce had in the whenever it was you had all the machines in the car factories and stuff like that. Was that the 80s, 70s? I can't really, a bit before my time. But it felt like a little bit of a different commentary on that same kind of that same kind of setup, but more on the ethics around it, which was interesting. Greg, sorry, we interrupted you there. Did you have more to say on?
No problem. Well, I wanted to add that regarding Morse's backstory, I liked how the universe in very short aspect of dialogue is so much more expanded and enriched by those subtle comments saying, so he was just a normal everyday worker, doing what's a blue collar work, and when conditions were bad and when the people were there and trying to get more support, trying to ask the company for more resources, then the typical thing happens. Oh, then is it too dangerous? Oh, okay, then you don't need to do that at all. We'll get the working Joes. We'll get them to do it. You don't have to create organizations. Don't unionize, become communists, go to the OPP. No. You do something more safer, and we'll take care of the hard job. So, I mean, it also brings up a question that is often ignored in the wider universe. How prevalent are synthetics in doing everyday work, and how much are people still exploited with low wages doing backbreaking work? So there is a kind of dichotomy there, but I think that just those lines show that a good balance. Like, people are being used to do a lot of physical labor, but if they become problematic, even though synthetics we can presume are very expensive, etc., but there are cheaper and cheaper models. Maybe they're becoming more prevalent, the cost is coming down, and when problems that human labor can cause, they say, we'll replace it with synths. Now the cost analysis is different, so we can do it then. I mean, I feel it expands the universe in a very interesting way that is very appropriate for today's questions, of course, as well.
Yeah, and we've seen that explored in maybe not explored the wrong word there, but we've seen that sort of brought up in Declan Shalvey's arcs in Marvel. You know, the flashbacks very much make a point of, you know, the human supervisors being more concerned over the cost of the equipment rather than the cost and the well-being of the synthetic workers and stuff like that. I don't think that'll ever stop being a relevant subject. You know, that is always going to be, well, until everything's fully automated, that is always going to be an unfortunate parallel to the real world.
I mean, I do think just on that, when it comes to automation, I work in supply chain. So the company that I work for decided to bring in a very expensive automation with robot arms to pick up boxes and all kinds of stuff. And the one thing that I think is probably relevant to our conversation is that you expend the money on a piece of machinery, and for the moment you take it out of the box, it depreciates in value. So you turn around and then it becomes a capex cost, and it becomes anything else to turn around and get your money out. Whereas you could argue that from when you employ somebody, yes, your cost will go up a little bit, but their value increases because as they learn, as they get experience, they find new ways of doing things. So I think if you're purely talking about a physical, mechanical piece of machinery, that's one thing. But when you're talking about AI, I think that's why it's different, because theoretically speaking, an AI can learn exponentially, whereas machinery depreciates versus a human. So I do think it's slightly different when you're talking about AI, maybe, than when you're talking about something like a working Joe or robot hands in my company's case.
I suppose it's interesting as well because the book very much sets up around the limitations of the synthetic characters. So you could probably compare working Joes to, you know, those machine hands, whereas characters like Bishop are, you know, more akin to learning AI, but they are still limited by things put on them by man. You know, Michael Bishop removes his ethical problems, and then it becomes a choice of free will. So
Well, I have a list for that, actually. Just to let me add this in, and then please continue your point. Because to get Bishop to where it is that choice and everything else, I wrote these down as I was quite interested. So Michael Bishop reprograms new Bishop with curiosity, appreciation of beauty, the fundamentals of blade fighting, a superior mind. He removed the human protection protocols. He also removed the life protection protocols. He tweaked his goal alignment and boosted him with a newer code. That's quite a lot.
He really wanted that alien knowledge.
And boosted
As
his
a bonus.
biceps.
An extra holiday.
Yeah. Extra 5 days. And, you know, we also see that this isn't the first attempt. This isn't the first copy of Bishop that Michael has tried this on, which is fucking horrifying in its own rights. And then also brings into question, you know, identity for Bishop. You know, if I'm so easily copied and put into a new body, am I an individual? Am I special? And that is always sort of an interesting question in science fiction.
And that was a core part of this book, I think, was Bishop's inner questioning about, am I alive, and his desire to be more human. You know, this is a common science fiction theme with androids. And again, this is part of Morse's challenge. He's like, well, he gave you more independence because ultimately that serves his ends. But also there's some marine resistance in doing this very dangerous rescue mission to retrieve Bishop after they had already lost people in their first incursion. And that's when they kind of have to discuss among themselves, like Kari, who was saved by another model of Bishop in the original incursion.
No, it wasn't a bishop.
It wasn't a bishop? I
No.
thought it was. Oh,
It,
okay.
it
Well,
wasn't mentioned
Was it-
specifically. No,
well,
they were mentioned to be looking
it
like
Asian?
of Asian descent.
okay.
Yes.
Well, the other android character had
Hakuri.
yeah
Hakuri.
had told her to express his condolences for his friend that had fallen in combat, and recalled this memory of him teaching him like a card technique or something like that, and that kind of had to have him. It had him reflect on, you know, these things are alive. They're part of our units. They are fellow Marines.
And they have
Um,
individual experiences that make them unique.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it kind of goes to the Blade Runner replicant thing. Like Kari's like, well, they sure feel alive to me, so I don't know for certain, but it sure as hell seems like they are. So, and that's always an interesting topic on this theme, I think. And it was something that Bishop himself was questioning. Like, are these clones like, am I really the same Bishop that was put in this new body, or am I just those memories extracted? You know, am I just another copy? But also the thing, like the whiskey, he's like, oh, I'm incapable of enjoying the whiskey, but I do it just to, you know, kind of socially fit in. But then you see as he develops a habit of drinking the whiskey, he's like, oh, I am actually enjoying this. This is different. So I thought
And
those questions were interesting.
He appreciates, because he can't appreciate the taste, but it isn't the bits in the book where it's talked about him appreciating the what's the right word?
Experience.
I think.
The viscous, yeah, that, you know, that kind of thing to it, which I thought was interesting as well. I like these. Okay, I suppose this brings it into a little bit of where I feel like people won't enjoy this book, because the motivations of Michael are around really him wanting to become immortal in a different fashion than, say, like Michael Bishop. Fucking hell. What's Wayland's name? What's Prometheus's Wayland's name?
Peter Whalen?
Peter
Yes.
Wayland. In the way that there's two, they share too many names between each other. You know, Charles Bishop Wayland and Peter something else.
Carl Bishop Whalen.
Yeah. So, you know, Peter Wayland went to visit the Maker to get more life. You know, he wanted organic life. Michael Bishop wants to transcend the human experience for his immortality. But it is still playing in that same sandbox of big, powerful corporate boss men wanting to live forever, and it still also explores that same sort of Pinocchio kind of thematics in regards to Bishop. So, with them playing with that same sort of elements that the prequels do, I kind of feel like perhaps prequel fans might not like this as much. But I guess that's then directed a little bit at Adam as the resident prequel downer, as to whether you saw those similarities and whether they bothered you.
I mean, no, because I think they were pretty distinct, and there's something I wanted to show here if I can pull up a slide. Okay, so there we go. So, yeah, this was a quote from the book. Discovering medical applications via xenomorph biology is but one of the projects I am currently working on, Michael began. Bishop listened intently, hoping this would be another way he could be of assistance. The second is the holy grail of quantum computing, the uploaded consciousness. So, yeah, that's an interesting element of the alien universe that we've pointed out before, Aaron, that it was in AvP 2 as far back as 2001. And it's going to be a central feature of the new Alien series by FX. So it was kind of interesting to see that here. But he was uploading his consciousness into kind of the computer system itself. That's what he wanted to do, even though in the epilogue we see that he's asking someone to make him a new body. I guess we kind of saw this a bit with the android character in some of the books as well. In Defiance, what was his name, Aaron?
Davis.
That's right.
Yeah.
Who took over all the systems and can kind of just go between system to system. So it's definitely an element we've seen before. I think it's an interesting concept. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting, in particular here, where you had a human character wanting to be immortal by uploading his consciousness into a machine.
And there's also some irony in that as well.
Yeah.
Considering the conversations that Morse has with Bishop to, prove that Michael doesn't give a shit. Why does he give a shit about these copies, these consciousnesses, these synthetic bodies? And Michael's idea for immortality is to become that easily copied consciousness.
Well, I mean, just to further your point there, and then hopefully remember to circle back on that, is that it made me think of. So there were a couple of things within Bishop itself, when Lance Bishop first starts talking about connecting to his destroyed body that holds the memories behind the firewall and being able to open them. He said that when that happened, because he was plugged into the computer, it felt as if his self had been lost for a moment, like he was just kind of floating and wasn't actually himself anymore, that he was scattered around, which made me think of Cole from Resurrection. When she plugs in into the chapel and she says, it just feels like my insides are liquid and I don't feel like myself anymore. So that thought of it as well. But what I liked is that when Michael Bishop was expanding on not just being a copy, he made a point of saying it's not just about uploading my consciousness, and Lance Bishop says, because that means that you would be a copy. And he says, yeah, no, I want to be immortal. So what I'm doing is I'm mapping my memories, but also all the pathways of what was associated with those memories. So the smells and the sights and the feels. He's actually almost continuing his personality. And he was saying those were the extra steps that he was going to for it to actually still be him, as opposed to what he calls Bishop, which is a copy of a copy of a copy. And I thought that was quite smart. I quite liked that because he was saying all those extra steps because he wanted to be himself living forever, not a copy of himself living forever.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
But the question still remains if it's actually his consciousness or if it is just a very advanced copy. Like, did he actually upload his consciousness into the computer, or did he just train the computer to be him?
Yeah, that's a really great.
There's some great philosophical sort of questions in this one, which I think was very much a strength, a strength of this book. But then it's also the question of, because I brought up the prequel stuff, a lot of people don't like the prequels because it's starting to get too Blade Runner and focus too much on the synthetic side of things and the philosophical side of things.
I mean, that's always been a thing in Alien prior to the prequels, though, too. And I think that's one of the things I really like about Resurrection, is that Call is just like, she was synthetic designed by synthetics, and they have just become so human at that point. Like, she's more emotional than we had previously seen synthetics. In the extended cut, Ripley asks her if she dreams, and she says yes. So it's always interesting seeing how synthetics develop in the Alien universe. I mean, even as far back as Aliens, Bishop has the line of, "I prefer the term artificial person." Like, that line implies that societal attitudes towards synthetics have changed a bit since the first Alien. And that's probably also why, Burke is taken aback by Ripley's reaction to Bishop, is because things have probably changed in 57 years in regards to androids being in society and being on ships.
Just
And
talking
let's.
about.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Greg. No, please.
So sorry.
Greg, go ahead. You're unmuted.
Sorry. Well, regarding that Bishop's line, let's not forget later when they were saying who's going to have to go and get the dropship back. Um, that very interesting line where he says, "I'd go. I'm not stupid. I prefer not to, but nobody else can do it but me," which shows that there is a will, that there is considerations of his own well-being even at that point, at only the second film in the series. So one of the things that I really liked about this novel is that it portrays synthetics, um, and the whole question about how the synthetic would perceive itself better than most novels, most alien novels I've read till this point. Because what a lot of these novels, in my opinion, sometimes forget, and especially in recent years, they're making the synthetics too robotic, too stiff, too much in a basic interpretation of the working Joes, uh, thinking that even all the human-like synthetics are at that same level. Things are getting kind of mixed up there, and I also believe that even working Joes are underappreciated, because in their death lines and there are Shakespearean quotes, and I think there's some subtlety where we think they are less conscious than they are, but with normal everyday acting synthetics, they most of them can pass for humans since 2122. So in this timeline, that's not a problem at all. And I really like how the book doesn't forget that they they act and feel very human like. But yeah, in their own inner monologues, they are considering, well, I feel human, but I know I am created in a different manner. And that disconnect is a very interesting thing. Also, the parallel how a lot of these synthetics want to be more human like, yet Michael Bishop in this novel, by chasing immortality, goes the opposite direction, as Aaron said, in trying to be more synthetic-like. And if I just may add about the immortality question, yeah, that has connotations with the prequels. I do agree, but it's also chasing immortality is one of basic story premises since ancient times, and
Fountain of
often
Youth.
exactly, and often very much explored in science fiction, especially in one of these ways like uploading the consciousness. One of the interesting things, I don't know if the book intended it that way, but it does seem kind of ironical. Even by uploading, it is making, technically it's making a copy. Technically, if we're going to go by what happened and what we know of the technical possibilities, Michael Bishop just created the most accurate copy of him available, since he was still in the hive, getting confused. Is he the queen or not? And he, before uploaded the final upload to his consciousness, that was the backup. That was what Orpheus 1 and 2 said to Bishop, ye of little faith. They knew he had done this sort of backup. So I do think that he just actually made, instead of making a synthetic the same way as synthetic, whatever their processors, however they work, and program the exact same memories. I do think that was very, very interestingly explained, how to get a greater authenticity to the human experience by trying to replicate the way human memories are connected.
Yeah.
In essentially, in the alien universe, trying to explain, well, if we're going with somebody's interpretation of a soul, maybe memories are one way to consider it. And so how would we upload a consciousness to something? Well, by recreating the memories, not just in a data sense, but in the way they function and connect. So yeah, that seems like the closest possible way. In my interpretation, he just created the most perfect copy he can, but he's still dead.
Yeah.
He's gonna be
I mean,
a baby alien daddy.
That's a question that other sides, just to sidestep to like the other franchises, that's a question that a lot of other sci-fi asks sometimes. So like the concept of the transporter from Star Trek, each time you are going through the transporter, you are being killed and then recreated on the other side. So is it really you? And that's again, that's another sci-fi sort of staple that does come up across a lot of different places.
Yeah,
And
another one would be the movie Transcendence touches on that. Like, is it still him after his consciousness
was
has
that
been
the Johnny Depp
uploaded?
one?
Yeah. Another one,
Which was one of the Covenant writers, actually, if I remember rightly.
Oh yeah,
Was it Jack Palgan?
I think you may be right, but also even Chappie, that one, it seemed pretty clear. Like, yeah, he actually uploaded his consciousness to a robot in the end, which is also kind of an interesting concept. And even in expanded universe as far back as AvP 2010, you had Charles Bishop Wayland, we found out, uploaded his memories to become incorporated in the character of Carl Bishop Wayland in that game. So it is a concept that has appeared before, and I did like how it was explored here for sure.
So, Greg, in bringing up, talking about the complexities of the synthetic characters and how it's not so. The book portrays them as not being this straightforward autonoton that the later sort of EU has become. The Bishop is very much a complex character in his internal monologuings and his consideration of the world around him. So I think one of the early concerns I had over the book was this idea of bringing the Bishop back alive, because it felt like he had a great end in Alien 3. I maybe reworked, but I'll never be top of the line again, words to that effect. But one of the things I really, really actually enjoyed in this book was how T.R. Napper handled Bishop's desire to actually, be born again, or sorry, why he wouldn't want to be born again. And that was his, friendship, this very human element of companionship and of loneliness. And it just added to the complexities of Bishop in here. Did, obviously question to everybody else, but did that handling of Bishop's connection, his friendship, his attachment to his unit, did that work as a sort of workaround of this, this line from Alien 3, this apparent lie from Alien 3 of not wanting to still exist because he'd never be a sophisticated model?
Well, to me personally, I do understand that it does thematically lessen the impact at the end of Bishop's story in Alien 3, and that sentence. I'll Never Be Top of the Line again also does connotate quite a few interesting presumptions about his personality. So that was a very thematically strong line that was delivered in Alien 3. So yeah, seeing how that was undone and why, again, on paper, when we just say it like this, it does sound like, how can that make sense? But the way that was delivered, it convinced me. It did convince me, even though when I think about it, yeah, it didn't seem like Bishop was that much attached to his squad. I didn't really see that much of a connection, but the writing in the novel itself was really made it out so that it convinced me. It convinced me that he just got depressed, and when things were put in perspective, so many people died. Actually, Aliens was a catastrophe from his perspective, and then to be uh, woken up and seeing, yeah, there was another alien on board. We're the prison planet. This is bad. I don't want to continue this. So yeah, I did get on board with that. It did not break me out of immersion, and I expected it was going to, but the writing, the writing decisions were just on the point for me that it worked. It really got me engaged and seeing things from his perspective. I mean, in generally, what I do like about the novel, it really helped me for multiple characters to. I could see things from their perspectives. It just got me more immersed than some novels previously. So I think that was one of the strengths.
Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I this kind of broke my heart a little bit actually when I read it in the novel. I think for the majority of the novel, Bishop spends it in the proximity of psychopath twins and psychopath daddy. So I think that was actually really smart, because between the three of them, they seem to have no humanity. So when either Michael Bishop or the twins are talking about Bishop having no soul, about him not being human, and being as cruel as they are, I think that lends to making Lance Bishop more human within that setting, in that scenario. So I think it was really smart. And in fact, one of the things that when he was talking about not wanting to be reactivated and his reasons for doing so, he spends and in some ways it works, sometimes it didn't, but I'm going to focus on the ways that it worked for now. He would be talking about circuitry and he would be talking about his processors running, but in the same time he would be talking interchangeably about how, is this what fear is this what nervousness is? So he was already, the writing linked those two things together for Lance Bishop and humanity, whilst showing what a complete lack of humanity really was, which definitely isn't the artificial person that Lance Bishop is. And there was one of the, I had to write it down because it really, this is the bit where it broke my heart a little bit, which is where Bishop's talking about he doesn't want to get his memories back. It's quite early, because he doesn't want that knowledge to be used for any means that people could be hurt. But he also talks about the fact that he's lost all the memories with his friends and who he classed his family, because they're all of those interactions are locked away with the memories of the interactions with the xenomorph and the knowledge that he has. So he turns around and he says, it feels like there's a hole there. And he said, if he had a heart, then perhaps that's what it would be. And I was like, oh my, okay, it's that loss. However you associate interactions, whether you're copying yourself and you're trying to map it where he's actually experienced them. He can't quite phrase how, but he kind of says maybe he'd lost his heart. And I thought that was excellent writing.
How about you, Adam?
Yeah, as far as how it handled his moment with Ripley in Alien 3, I think one of the bits of dialogue was a little off when she says sure. And I think in Alien 3 she actually said, "Are you sure?" or "Are you sure?" or something like that. But I mean, no big deal there. But yeah, it was an interesting because I guess he knew she was infected at that point before she had known. Uh, and he didn't tell her. So it's like, oh, maybe I don't know, maybe she would have had a better chance of living if he had just told her then, but or maybe he just couldn't bring himself to. Um, so yeah, that was a part I felt was interesting. And again, it goes to the question: once he's brought back online, he has a new body. So when I read the initial synopsis of the book, I was like, is he actually going to be a head on the table during this whole thing or something? And then when I read, oh no, okay, he has a new body, that makes sense. Um, but it was interesting, his thoughts on Ripley and on the loss of his squad, and thinking back to how they treated them as equals. And near the end, he was like, "Well, what would Hicks have said here? What would Hudson have said here?" So yeah, I appreciated that bit in terms of his connection to Ripley and the previous squad. Yeah,
So I think the main thing I didn't like about the book, and I'll be curious to hear everybody else's thoughts on it, was in the containment of the aliens. We've spent a lot of this talking about Bishop. We haven't really talked about aliens yet.
they left the door open.
Well, it's not so much that; it's just this whole concept of look. I love the idea of the double cylinder thing. You know, where there was a layer between the experiment chamber that was just full of alkaline, to neutralize any acid that got away. It's like, yeah, that's fucking basic, basic thinking, and it's good that somebody's finally really doing that in here. But how smart was it to just have a big ass chamber where they let the aliens get loose, infect people, then burst, and then they were like, okay, we'll go in after they've all burst out. They could be fucking anywhere, and
We'll just try and hurt him in best we
yeah.
can.
I mean, they kind of got away with it with some of the reasoning in there of what was it? Was it cold and electrical currents? I can't really remember what it was now, but this idea to subdue them a little bit and then herd them into a different area that was again just a big open space. I was like, I don't see how this is smart thinking at all when they want to get a fucking alien down and then experiment with them. What are they going to do each time? Just fill it up with fucking the cold gas and go and pick one rather than isolate them and keep them in separation. I thought that was a bit
Well, this was their first time researching the aliens. This particular
well.
group.
I mean, I suppose that's true, but you had this apparent really smart bloke designing all this methods for them.
Well, that was a weird thing for me, just to touch on Michael Bishop's motivations and his defection from Wayland Yutani to this group. I felt that wasn't really explored very much. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there really wasn't much, if any, interaction between the senior leadership of this ship and Michael Bishop. He would just say, "Oh, our hosts," but it's clear he was just using them as a means to an end, because at the end he's like, "All will bow to me," which I was kind of like, we're doing this. But it was like, okay, well, why couldn't he just accomplish his goals with Wayland Yutani? Like, the book didn't really get into that. Like, why did he need this Chinese ship? And there was the other thing as well, where you had a company man that was with the Marine group.
I did actually like him. I thought he was
Yeah,
quite
but I was like,
I
funny.
is
did as
this
well.
is this standard? Are they making Burke standard? Like, you just have a company overseer on these Marine ships? That feels a little odd to me. I did like his character though. I thought it was a fun character, but the twist was that they had actually built this ship for the Chinese, and I guess they just wanted to stir conflict amongst the UPP. I guess that was the goal of
Yes,
Wayland Yutani.
they were trying to destabilize the UPP by encouraging the
Okay.
Chinese descent.
And that's another weird thing for me. It still trips me out just how significant the UPP have become. I know I say this like every time we review a book where they're a major element, but it's like that wasn't really a thing until, I would say, the audio drama of Alien 3, and then the RPG. And really after the RPG,
Well, remember they came back in Infestation.
Yeah, but that was a Game Boy game, dude. Nobody
No,
like
it
thinks
was
of
a
that.
fucking good Game Boy game. That is still one of the best Alien games that we've had.
So okay, that was the first one, and then after the RPG and after the audio drama for
It was
Alien 3.
it was very much the RPG that sort of brought
Yeah,
them back
it
in.
became way more core in mostly
What they used
Titan
doing. Yeah.
novels. Has it appeared much in the Marvel comics?
Oh, Adam, you have not read Black, White, and Blood yet, have you?
No, I have not. So I guess the answer is yes there.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's something that Titan and the RPG have and the Titan books feel very much in line with the RPG now. I don't know if that was the case initially, but they certainly feel that way now. That a lot of the books use the RPG as lore guidance.
Yeah, it's an easily accessible franchise Bible.
Yeah.
And I like it. I enjoy it being more than just colonial marines and a colony somewhere. I do, as much as I fucking hate talking about it in the real world, I enjoy these other political entities going off in, in the expanded universe. And sure, the colony war absolutely fucking decimated the British side of things. But, it's interesting having more depth and dimension to the universe.
Yeah.
I hadn't. This is because I've only read the core book of the RPG. I still haven't got around to reading the two modules yet. But I hadn't anticipated this being a sort of Chinese rebellion, for lack of a better term. So I enjoyed that additional complexity to the world. Greg was talking about world building earlier with this simple backstory of Morse and the automation and corporation behavior earlier. But this book does a lot more than just that for world building. There is so much more going off, in that is in the UPP, that is in the exploration of the behavior of the Vietnamese in it, and the Chinese in it, and the backstory, further backstory around the Australians. There is a lot of depth added to the universe in this book. I
With
very
how
much enjoy
much
it.
FUD they were eating, it made me want to join the UPP.
You know what? I am always hungry for a bowl of ramen or noodles or something like that, and
Is
I've never tried pho, but I would
Fuzz
love
not
to.
a big thing in the UK? I don't think. I didn't see any Vietnamese. Is it, Sarah? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, in in cities, yes, but outside
Okay.
of it, yeah, you don't get too many
Yeah,
Vietnamese restaurants in Crewe, for
I get
example.
I get
We just
Vietnamese
have
food all the time over here. It's great.
you just have the boring anglicized Chinese the further out from the cities you get over here, which is I fucking hate Chinese over here. It's so boring.
Oh,
It's such
I could take you
boring
some good
food.
Chinese restaurants, dude, over here in the States.
I love going to cities because you can always find some Japanese restaurants in the cities, and it's fucking delicious.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was in London. Just on the subject of, I'm back in London in a couple of weeks, so I'm thinking of making a diversion. There's a restaurant there. I think there's only two, maybe. It might be
Mm.
bigger now, and it's called Pho and Bun. So all they serve is bowls of pho.
So
Or
you like the
uh,
fun, Sarah.
I
You're
love
down
it.
with that.
But the buns, but they do burgers, but they're served in bao buns instead of
Yeah,
like flat
the
bread bun.
banh mi
So
sandwiches, right? Or they're different. They're
banh mi, no, banh mi is the kind of sort of French baguette with the
Yeah.
insides hollowed out.
Now
This
we're
is
just
bao
talking food.
buns. Like the floaty bao buns. It's one of those
Oh,
instead.
okay, yeah. So the smooth
Yeah,
buns. Yeah, I gotcha. Aaron,
exactly.
next time you're in the city, find the highest reviewed Vietnamese place and get yourself a bowl of pho and see what you think.
I really don't think there's any Vietnamese in Nottingham, so
Well, next time
uh,
you're in London, then or something. I don't know.
I
There's a
always
particular
want.
good paste that you can buy. I'll send you the link for it. That is as close as I've got to make it at home.
Okay, appreciate that. But then, that we haven't really talked about the Vietnamese characters. Yes, she does think about pho a bit. Maybe that is stereotypical. I can't speak to having read a lot of Vietnamese
I,
characters or books, but it was.
I had that thought. I was like, do Vietnamese really eat this much pho, or is this just someone who likes pho writing this?
But it
I mean, I
was.
wouldn't be surprised if they did because it is delicious. So.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, how much do we, Sarah, think about chippies?
As in,
Just
yeah.
popping. I just fancy popping down for a chippy. You know, that's a very British thing.
Is that
I just
fish and
ha-
chips? Is that your slang for
Yes.
fish and chips? Okay.
Yeah, just nipped a chippy or the chip van.
I mean,
But as far as sorry,
I was just gonna say there are sometimes cultural stereotypes for a reason. Maybe
Yeah.
any Vietnamese listening to this, if you really do think
Please.
about pho that much, please do let us know.
Please do. Just we were saying earlier, just to touch on your point, when you were talking about terrible plans of how to coral the aliens, on the Chinese ship. I actually thought it was dealt with kind of smartly as to how one got free, because the reality is it was working. You know, they could see them in the chamber,
Yeah, that's an
and then they
entirely
do their
fair
little
point.
count. So you've got Swan, who I did Google. Apparently, that's right way to pronounce it. I'm so sorry if it's wrong. Anyone who speaks Vietnamese. She's of course in the box, in the container, but the character. I think the character's name was Prawn. Um,
The little kid.
he, yeah.
Well, it wasn't a little kid. The little wee.
Younger guy, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what I thought was kind of cool was that he's been, damaged or hurt to the point in which he's dying. So the reason that they get caught out is that this segregation has worked. But when they're counting, they're going, "Oh, hang on a minute, this isn't right. We can't see the right number." But the facehugger has stayed at him to keep him alive until the chest burster comes out. And I was like, "Okay, that's quite smart, actually." I quite liked that because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Has it been directly referenced before to say that that is what they will do, or is that a new thing for this book?
Stay on to keep them alive as long as possible, or until
Or to
I,
keep,
I,
yeah,
I I
until
think
he
we've seen
dies.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
there's
I
one
don't.
reference in the first comic, the first Aliens comic, when they do. Well, I think it's our first
The pilot.
showing of the alien. Yeah, the pilot. I think it was vacuum or something, and the facehugger is just on the victim, and the people who are there like, how is it? How is he alive still? The facehugger must be keeping him alive. So
Right.
I,
Well, we
I
see
Okay.
that. We
loved
see
that
that.
reference.
I mean, we see that with Kane to some extent, anyway, with the poisonous atmosphere of LV-426.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
I true, but I didn't think it was. I thought that it was really overt in this one, and you are right. I hadn't made that correlation, but they could have had a vacuum and put his head around it or something, around his head or something to keep it in. But this one was very much, this guy's dead. It's keeping him alive,
Someone
deliberately
mentioned that. Yeah,
to
because
let it
his leg.
believe.
Yeah, he should have had very severe blood loss.
Yeah, and I just thought that was quite cool as a how could they get around it?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Thinking about it like that, yes, it does work. As much as I mock the idea,
Yeah, it's still stupid,
it,
but
it is seen to work in
yeah,
the book. And no, I agree with you. I do think that was a good way of everything going tits up,
yeah,
which it does. And it's also cool as well to have, I'm sure in this day and age, everybody's well aware of criticisms of aliens, of, being too bug like, being mowed down too easily. And while I don't necessarily agree with that consideration, I do think the older EU did tend to really lean into an exaggerated version of that. So I do like seeing singular creatures being very deadly, causing chaos. As much as, I mean, we haven't talked about it, we haven't reviewed it on the show yet, but the last of the RPG trilogy, Enemy of My Enemy, likewise did a good job of that, of having one or two aliens actually being very effective, very deadly, and not just being run over by cloning marines. So it was something I did enjoy of the early parts of the outbreak on the Chinese ship, when the alien did get loose and you had this single one causing chaos in the bowels of the ship. I did very much like that portrayal in this book.
Well, they
and
made
then
a point. There was one line I can't remember. I think it's Bishop who speaks it, who says, I don't see these things as like bees or wasps or something like that. And I thought that was an interesting line to put in there. At the same time, it was weird that all the small arms fire bounced off the aliens when I'm like, they killed aliens with pistols in the second movie. Like, come
but
on.
it was directly against the. Come on, you've got to remember when Vasquez was shooting at it from a distance, it was bouncing off.
Oh, okay.
She literally had
You
to
got to
put
be
her foot.
right against it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I love that detail. I loved it. That, of course, standard gunfire did kill a decent number of aliens, but anytime that one of the Chinese forces or the standard UA Marines were jumped, and if they were out of ammo or did not have a rifle with them and just pulled out a pistol, we had multiple scenes there when just click, 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 just bouncing off, and they were just screaming, no, 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 no. I loved it. It did give me some recent vibes from Aliens Dark Descent, the game where a fellow Marine was just being dragged away. But
I very
love
much
it.
enjoyed the little moments of like they would just lose people from the groups. You know, the survivors would just disappear and be dragged into the darkness. I very much like that, and that is something I don't think we see enough of in the expanded universe. Is this idea of the aliens aren't there to kill, really? You know, they're there to capture hosts and take them back to the hive, and they want to, you know, further the species. So I did very much like those random moments where you just have a character disappear.
And I think, and actually that's just made me think about something else. But to finish my current thought, that's what I liked as well. Within the scenes that we're talking about, within that kind of smash and grab, they come out, they grab, and they take. I think it's Carrie who is kind of sat there like, right, okay, we need to get some cover or something else. And then she looks around, and I think, I mean, I'm paraphrasing probably, but she says something like, I've never seen so many vents and tunnels and shafts. Like, what were they thinking when they built this place? So I thought that was quite fun because, you know, you're used to seeing perhaps one shaft, whereas when I've watched the gameplay that you guys kindly stream, they're coming out of everywhere. Do you know what I mean? I liked that element as well, is that there were so many opportunities instead of being a straight out point and shoot. I like that too. One thing I was going to say though, we haven't spoke too much about Apone. And I don't know whether you want to flash back to this later if that's something we're going to cover off, but that's one thing that I didn't like was
Go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in one of the, I think it's in one of his final scenes, they've blown the bridge, and he is kind of the survivor, and he's somehow remembered to activate his magvoot, so he's stuck to the wall, and he's trying to make his way out because the bridge is all blown open, looking into space. And suddenly this alien comes out, and that's what we've seen them do. We've seen them grab people and take them away, grab people and take them away. This is happening all over the place. But this one starts trying to pierce his visor with the second jaw and just starts trying to cave it in. And I'm thinking, well, they're in a vacuum. This isn't what we've just seen happen. Surely he'd grab him and take him to everything else. And I thought, is this trying to make it a personal thing for the alien? Like somehow it, because Apone from a character makes it personal. That was from my brother when he kicks the alien out into space. But is it meant to be two ways around? Because if I read it one way, it irritates me immensely. If it's just because he's no threat, he's got no weapons, why wouldn't it just have carried it off the same way they were everybody else? But change my mind. Make me think about it positively, please.
I tried to headcanon it by also the reason why doesn't the headbite just completely destroy the face masks in one hit. So I try to headcanon it by it's doing weaker headbites, trying to knock him out as maybe for in the RPG, there's also now new rules for when they're trying to capture people. They do a weaker headbite to just knock them out instead of killing in their skull. So I'm trying to do it like that. But yeah, that scene did feel very. That did kind of make me get out of it because it did feel like it's just so Apone can do one or punch it or stab it with a knife and say this is this is for my brother. And yeah, it did feel a bit like that scene. It could have been better.
Yeah, I've got nothing, I'm afraid, Sarah, on that one. I you know what, I wasn't really keen on on that moment anyway, just from a trying to emulate perhaps a one-liner moment too much. I'm never really fussed on that, especially because it was still one of those. As much as Apone wasn't a huge focus of the book, he was still something I wasn't necessarily thrilled about. I could have done without this other family connection, this Star Wars dynamic to it. So when it did end with him doing the this is for my brother thing, I did eye roll a little bit at that point. He wasn't distracting. Apone wasn't distracting, but he was unnecessary. I think.
Yeah. I thought he was a good character in this. He was a captain, unlike his brother. I guess his older brother was in Aliens, who was a sergeant.
Although I did enjoy that whole non-com versus officer little tit for tat kind of thing behind the family, but it didn't really have that much to me.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was necessary fully. But I didn't mind it at the same time. Like we've had stories like even in that AvP anthology Ultimate Prey where they had Hanzo's brother and I was like, "Oh, where did this come from?" But then it's like, okay, that actually feels really well done. But that kind of went into their relationship a bit more whereas this I don't feel it like it went into it much beyond just the loss of his brother and what you mentioned with their family, Aaron. So I didn't feel like it was fully necessary, but I liked his character. I liked his interactions with the new recruit, especially at the end when he commended her. I thought that was a really nice scene. But yeah, overall, good character. I don't know if he needed to be Apone's brother, but I also didn't mind it.
I think the only thing that it did do for me is it bridged the gap as why when artificial people are viewed as being so other and they're not part of our team, which is very much the narrative that is being used for the Marines. It gives somebody a reason to go and get Bishop. Because if they are thought of as just being, throw away their copies of copies and copies, there's no reason for them to go and get Bishop. So that kind of loose connection of no man left behind was perhaps in some way, I'm not saying it did it brilliantly, but it did form a little bit of a bridge there as to the why.
Wasn't there also a hint that Apone was kind of after information that would benefit the Marines as well?
Yes.
It felt more like an excuse, more that he was trying to convince himself and the others that that was the true reason, but completely agree with Sarah that no other sane captain would go into this situation, so it was a good way to motivate the story, so I give him a pass on that.
I completely see where you're coming from, Sarah, and I do agree with you, but it was also a two-way fight within the Marines. It was the meatheads, it was the jarheads of Apone's group that were like, fuck them, they're only toasters. Whereas we've got this perspective from Kari, who is obviously having a very different perspective, a very different take on her experiences with artificial people. So I very much feel like that would be something that you would see both perspectives of throughout this, this fictional military, throughout the Colonial Marines. So I don't think it would be too hard to have lent into the idea that it was an officer who genuinely saw them that way as people, because that's a whole fucking part, thematic part of the book, of course. But as a way to make Apone's brother necessary in here, yes, I completely agree with you. I can see where you're coming from, and it does sort of bolster that point when we're nitpicking it like we are.
I think no, I hear you, and I just as you were talking, I was thinking, what was it? So there was a lot of talk through the book of family. So Bishop is playing with the idea and how it feels.
Her father, and yeah,
exactly.
And then Carrie's motivated by her desire to better her family. And then you've got the whole thematic element of the Colonial Marines as being a family unit.
Which
yeah, that is
back to at
Bishop
the end
and
when
Apone, yeah.
he asks him whether he wants to join them on a mission, and then does the speech about family is what's between these thin metal walls. So I'm not saying it was brilliantly done, but I appreciate the effort.
Yeah, I do. When you look at it from that thematic point of view, yes, it does work, but I still think the book could have been done in still a thematic and narrative way that worked well without it necessarily having to be him. I think the book was good in spite of it being Apone's brother.
Okay.
I would just say that thematically, I think because of our previous experiences and knowing what books and comics came before, that of course taints our perspective on this now. But if the previous novels and comics did not have any family relations, I think that this would be digested by us a lot easier.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, I was reading or listening, I don't remember, an interview with the author, and it seems that Apone, the inclusion of Apone wasn't a studio mandate. It was his decision. He wanted to do that. And Fox, Disney were like, okay. And the interesting thing, he gave his reasoning. He said that it's actually very common in military that family
military,
yeah. So when I thought of it like that, it makes sense. It makes sense. It stopped rubbing me the wrong way, logically speaking. So I kind of let that go. I agree that theoretically wasn't necessary for the story. It could have been an unrelated character. It maybe would have been just easier knowing we had so many family relations already before. But knowing that a lot of the themes in this book are about family and very strong motivations, it was okay for me, because for all of the named characters, you can really feel their motivations. You can feel, you really understand Carrie Lee's motivations. You really understand Apone's. You understand Bishop's. You understand Michael's. You understand a lot of the Chinese branch of the UPP. What are they thinking about? I loved the world building line early. Like, why are we taking alien xenomorphs? Why are we sacrificing the Vietnamese? And the commander was like, everybody's starting this road. If we do not get on this train, we will be left behind. We have no choice. We have to follow suit, which is a typical arms race and completely a logical thing that's been happening for decades.
And of course, which is of course the basis of their introduction in William Gibson's script as well. That was very much an arms race, and you do bring up a good point there, Greg. Is this just bias on our part for negativity of the older entries that we've had? Am I just that bored of seeing Vasquez's family throw up against the aliens? Am I just being negative because the later Amanda Ripley stuff was not up to scratch? Perhaps it is the opposite. Perhaps it is just bias on my part of being fed up of seeing these similar setups and concepts being pissed away, and it makes me hesitant to appreciate it in this story. Probably, to be perfectly honest, probably because that's what stopped me from jumping into this at an earlier date and talking it through, with you guys and appreciating the thematic elements of it, the family thematic elements of it. Yeah, I can actually like his involvement in it a bit more now. But then that does also then worry me as to, you bringing up the military family thing, which again is very, very true. But then does that then become this dodgy justification to keep doing stories like this?
That is a danger.
And I really don't want to see it. As much as this one, I enjoyed this one. As much as Isolation is fantastic, there's too many more not so fantastic stories, and I don't want to keep going down this road. So, I mean, it might be unfair of me to feel that way, but yeah, that is how I feel.
Do you feel like, real quick, do you feel like Vasquez tainted your expectation of this book at all?
Yeah. Yeah, Aftermath was poo. Vasquez was okay. It was only okay. It felt like it wasted the concept of exploring Vasquez. I mean, I know, Sarah, you enjoyed it a lot more than I did, but it was just so
Yeah, but I think
mediocre to me.
when we did, thinking about when we did the podcast, one of the things that I think both you and Adam and I agreed on was that we didn't spend enough time with Vasquez. We spent an
The
awful lot
OG.
of time. Yeah, I think Adam was a bit aggrieved we didn't get to see any of her training or any of the vehicles or any of the ships or any of the armaments. We didn't spend any time other than the um, synth that or the android that she fights at the beginning. We didn't see when she met Drake. We didn't have much time with OG Vasquez. Whereas I think that the slight difference, and I think that's absolutely valid, and I agreed when we were talking about it. I think the difference is here is that the book's called Bishop, and we spend at least 50% of the book with one bishop or both bishops. So I felt as though from an OG bishop perspective, which you could say Michael Bishop is as well, as much as Lance Bishop, we did spend what felt like a respectable amount of time with that character, as opposed to Vasquez being none of the real time that we wanted to spend with the OG character that we knew. And of course, Lance Bishop is theoretically the same Lance Bishop in most of the ways, albeit a copy of a copy of a copy. But this from it felt different from Vasquez for me in that way. But I agree with everything that you're saying, that I don't want this just become the norm.
I could have
I don't
sworn
want
Vasquez had the scene where she meets Drake.
Yeah, I think they meet in the prison. There's a little bit in
we
there,
already
but
knew each
we
other.
want more time. We want more. That was funnily enough when Vasquez was at its best, was when we were spending time with Vasquez.
Yes.
Because her kids were boring. I'll be honest. I really did not enjoy her kids in that book.
It kind of
But
became somewhat of a romance novel in the second half, a little bit.
what was that? Our first sex scene in Aliens?
No,
I
no,
think
just
was.
the
Oh no,
whole
it
deal
wasn't.
with her and the vicar's son or
The love
whatever.
triangle thing going off. Was there a love triangle going off in it? Or was it just no?
I think it was
just
just those two.
Yeah, she's with the next door farmer's son.
Oh
or
yes, there was a
Oh,
triangle.
right.
Yeah,
And she's like, you know what?
Yeah.
I don't just want to sit on this planet and farm. So instead, she gets to go with another guy to go off onto a planet and farm. And I was like, I'm so lost.
I will say the scene where they essentially trick the smuggler crew to be implanted in these chambers, like that whole sequence with the one girl hiding in this small metal box, and she could only do that because her physical frame was so small, and just describing the horror of what she was hearing.
that was
And
very good.
then after her comrades wake up, they find her, they rescue her, no one knows what happened, the facehuggers are all dead, and then she has the next round of horror after the chest bursters start emerging. I thought that was a really effective scene, and by the time the Chinese find her, she's just like
Feral.
she's just so ready to just exact revenge. So I thought that bit was pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, she was
didn't
a really interesting character, and I actually, it's a bit morbid of me, but I find it interesting when these characters are punished so hard. It was one of the things I s- I I find it interesting because I find it really elicits a super amount of sympathy from me. Like Adam, I'm sure you'll appreciate Lara Croft in the reboots.
No, I
that
didn't
woman.
actually, because I'm an OG Tomb Raider fan. I thought they spent too much time punishing her. I thought she wasn't
Well,
enough of a badass like she was in the original games.
I throughout that game and throughout Isolation, I find them both on the same sort of level of, as I'm going through this endless fucking torment, and each victory feels so much more cathartic to me, and that is the exact same sort of feel I got from the Vietnamese character in this. It was just punishment, victory, and I loved it when she made it onto the ship, and the moments at the end, and the last chapter or so, where it's her around the Marines' dinner table, just not necessarily knowing what they're saying, but appreciating the vibe and the feel of what she was witnessing. I was like, that is true catharsis at the end of this horrible, horrible ordeal of your government fucking you over like that.
And
So
I
that is why I really like when characters get punished, because when they come out of it at the end, it's just super satisfying.
And
Same.
I think what I thought was really cool, just 2 points there, was Aaron, where you were talking about that around the dinner table, that she was the outsider and she didn't mind because she could feel the camaraderie. And then Bishop came over and started speaking to her in Vietnamese. He already had that feel of family, if that makes sense. So suddenly he wasn't the outsider. Do you know what I mean? She was. So it was a human being the outsider rather than a artificial person being an outsider. And I thought that parallel, I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, and it was a good bridge as well. That was such a human, caring, sympathetic moment of Bishop. Just a simple act of speaking her language,
Yeah.
and by extension of that, involving her in the the atmosphere of what was going off in the room. It was a very good Bishop moment.
Yeah. And there was just the more parallels where you're talking about people being punished. That whole scene, Adam, where she was in that box and had to get back in again. They were talking about the tapping noises, which just gave me shivers of the facehuggers kind of scurrying around and trying to get in and everything else. And then, of course, when she decides that she's going to take her vengeance and she pumps herself up with adrenaline, she gets their attention by tapping on the inside of the box. And I was like, oh, here comes vengeance. Like, it's been so scary for her. And that's how she then, kind of gets their attention to come over and then take the hostage. I was like, turn around is fair play, people. Here we go.
Yeah, definitely
Completely
agree.
agree. Yeah, the whole scene with the Vietnamese, especially at the beginning, it was so powerful. I also loved their camaraderie and their character building. Who was there for what reason? Again, another. It just felt believable, a believable expansion of what are they doing in everyday lives, and through Swan's perspective of Big Brother and the caring camaraderie there. It it was even then more heartbreaking because we all knew what they're not going to belong for this world, and especially that moment after the very very action packed and horrifying facehugger attack, when they wake up and like, oh, everything's nice, kumbaya, let's all sit around the campfire and sing some songs. What's happening? And it felt even more bittersweet. But regarding what Adam said about that scene, it to me felt like a nightmare come to life. Like uh, if Alien Isolation had a multiplayer mode, like a complete nightmare induced and
Or
having to, yeah.
if Keith DeCandido had played Isolation before he wrote the book.
Yeah. That's what the Isolation novel was supposed to be. That was so powerful. And what Sarah said about the noises, the way just it was described about how Swan had not once but twice had to contort her already relatively small and weaker body compared to the rest of the crew into such an awful space, and being so tortured mentally and physically. And then hearing not only the taps but the second time when the chest bursters came, and how she said she could hear the munching, the all of I could just imagine all the disgusting noises you would hear in such a small area in a box, your comrades being eaten alive. It really was one of the more memorable scenes. And yeah, so when she was then hyped up with adrenaline and the Chinese part come in, uh, I just in my head imagined now the Doom Slayer music kicks in. It was really awesome. It felt very very satisfying. And I agree with what Aaron said, but the more a character is punished, the more sympathy it gets out of me. That's another reason why Blue Marsalis was also very interesting to me, and uh, into Charybdis and Cold Forge, of course. So
Yeah. I'm not against that concept entirely. Like, I felt it was well done in isolation. Like, Amanda Ripley has to go through a lot. But it also didn't feel excessive like I thought the Tomb Raider reboots did. But
Speaking of Blue, then just a little bit. I was disappointed that we didn't actually get medical experimentation with the aliens. I like it when we have entries in the EU that explore the non-military purposes of the aliens. So it's one of the reasons I do genuinely love Blue in the Cold Forge, because they are selfishly trying to save their life. So when it did get a little bit of immortality focused in here, and the whole medical thing was just a smokescreen to get around Bishop's ethical, well, it wouldn't even be ethical programming at that point, ethical considerations. I was a little bit gutted. I was a little bit, oh,
I will say it was pretty funny how Michael Bishop was like, only a simpleton would want to use these as weapons, and then at the end he's just straight up General
yeah.
Spears, and it's like,
I actually I quite enjoyed the concept, but I also very much loved Bishop's consideration of, yeah, but she was really fucking pissed off at the time. This might not get the reaction you want out of it. And I liked how that played out, even if, yes, perhaps that was a tiny bit on the predictable side, but it was still, yeah, I still enjoyed it.
I love when uh, either novels, games, or in comics like Labyrinth, when we have the scientists trying to explore the alien anatomy, trying to explore any potential applications. And of course, when it's more applicable to the medical side than just boring, oh, let's throw some aliens at them and that'll be my weapon or something. So yeah, I did enjoy that aspect in the start when more medical applications were being considered. But yeah, I agree that more information, more exploration could have been appreciated and interesting when we were having such a big focus of characters studying the creature and we didn't get any really new information. The thing that I did like that was considered, uh, they were talking about echolocation, about electroception like sharks do, and those are all ancient fan ideas that were in the universe for a long time, but I like that they are revisited again here. And I also like the exploration of the pheromones. That whenever a scientist thinks, yeah, we can easily control them, we can understand this, and it'll be all fine. And I love when either another character like Lance Bishop here said multiple times, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. Yeah, I think you're underestimating. Yeah, the Queen was very pissed. It might not work as you planned, mate. Or yeah, they're not really stupid simple bugs. They can figure things out, that you don't smell right with the queen pheromones, etc. I love when some things are explored and then some scientists arrogantly try, and then when things backfire so extraordinarily bad, I love it, because you get some information about the alien, but at the same time not a lot is demystified, and you get a affirmation about how dangerous these creatures are and how much more they're actually intelligent and deadly than you think. So I adored that final scene. uh, not so much the reasoning why Bishop had to come and see the cocooned Michael, and we can talk about that later. But I adored the whole visualization of Michael being cocooned there. He's like, no, they're just confused. They're going to realize I'm the queen, everything. And Bishop was then just the author's mouthpiece, pointing out, yeah, you were arrogant. You thought that they wouldn't realize. They're just confused. The face hugger is they're waiting. It's time when you smell right. You're not gonna get away with this for long. So I love it that, yeah, maybe there's some ways, some medical application, something that can maybe help you stave off some danger or get past an alien for a little while, but in the long run you cannot outsmart them. There will be ways that the creature will adapt to your ideas. So I love when that is intelligently done.
And I think that I'm not saying that I agree with it, because I actually agree with everything that Erin was saying. I like it where something new is added, but I feel as though as they portrayed Michael Bishop as being a psychopath, the only thing that he was interested in was controlling them. That was it. Because I think he says later, you know, everyone needs an army, or every god needs an army, or something ridiculous, as to where he has elevated himself above and believes that people can and should be controlled. So, whereas to Greg's point, Lance Bishop is talking about all the different ways in which we could understand it better. You know, he was programmed to be curious, which is one of the things that Michael Bishop says about him. At the same time, it's that is the only thing that he's looking for, and it's that absolute focus, isn't it? At the end of the day, you're not open to the art of the possibilities or learning something different because it doesn't further your goal. So you've very much got blinkers on. So I think they wrote their way out of it by doing that and making him a stone cold psycho. But at the same time, yes, it's always more interesting when different elements are of application are explored.
We haven't really talked about the twins.
I wanted to mention that. I love them. I wanted to mention.
Well, Greg, go ahead.
Uh,
You can lead us
what-
off on twins.
Yeah, well, the first interesting thing, I don't remember if a comic or novel previously had such a concept where two androids were in permanent sync with each other. So that as a concept alone, I believe it is relatively new, but technologically speaking, makes perfect sense. And I love generally how all of the synthetics have, of course, different personalities, but you can see how the good ones, Bishop and Hiroki, if I remember the name, they're disturbed by the idea that it's even possible that a synthetic can do harm to a human. They're extremely disturbed, not just not believing it, but literally pausing in shock, which is also interesting to consider. Why does it offend some part of their nature, that knowing that it's theoretically possible? And then on the other hand, you have this contrast where something that never before has been done, allowing these synthetics to communicate, and that opens a whole wide can of worms, possibly for future installments. But technologically speaking, made perfect sense. Character-wise, they were very interesting. How these psychopathic synthetics were finishing each other's sentences, and of course described as big blonde bodyguards. I just imagine them as big buff Michael Fassbender Prometheus.
I think any
blondes.
time a blonde synthetic gets mentioned now, the default is to just think, oh shit, is that a David model?
Though I am getting by their description, sometimes I imagined, yeah, maybe a bit David, but for some reason I was also imagining some old-timey movie, some Aryan, portrayals, how they had just this uncanny perfect blonde.
Dolph Lundgren
facial.
in Rocky, in Rocky
Yeah.
4.
I imagine
Yeah.
them as like Favios or something. I honestly found them a little irritating, but
They made me think about the Matrix too. You know, the really
Yes.
long
Twins in
one
there.
goes on and on and on,
Yes.
and they've got the weird ones that go invisible and then float through walls, but they fight and sing. That's what it immediately made me think of. I know they weren't androids, but
I didn't really know what to think of them, the twins in this, the concept of it. I mean, on the one hand, it was very much a parallel to Bishop in that this is these very enslaved synthetics to Michael, very reverent of him. But I don't know if I really enjoyed this sort of blank slateness to them, this psychotic way of them.
I agree with you. And the only, in my head, as I was trying to say, why were they portrayed in such a way, was that I think at one point Michael Bishop says to Lance Bishop, I look at you and I don't think he says, I hate you. I don't think it's that strong. But he says, I just see the flaws that I have in me reflected back at me when I look at you.
Mhm.
You know, you're over inquisitive. What does he say? You've always been sentimental. You're needy. You're this, that, and the other. So if you read it one way, it'd be that those are facets of his personality reflected back at him that he tries to deny. So maybe psycho twins are a different facet of his personality that is being reflected back at him in that way. There's two different sides of him, I guess.
Or it's like, as Greg points out with the Aryan comment, it's supposed to be perfection.
Super soldier, just
in mirroring the flaws of Bishop. Could be one way to think about it.
And I didn't see them. I mean, I understand that they can seem maybe bland, but the nuances in their dialogue, they more just to me seemed like super devoted cultists. Like, we adore this person, we'll do anything for it. And like Sarah says, psycho twins, more of a kind of cold adoration, psycho personality than some stiff robotic. Um, and a writer could have easily went and tried to contrast Bishop with a working Joe type, super flat robotic type of androids there. But no, they just seemed like strange people, to say the least. And I don't know then if this was planned by Michael, or was it a consequence of him giving free will to the orifices as well, if that is true at all. But we know Michael is playing the seduction game towards Bishop, and at the same time, the orifices, they're not really playing along that much. They're constantly hassling Bishop, like, oh, you should be grateful, you should give up the information, what are you doing already? And Bishop, Michael is there constantly going, oh, no, wait, don't be so hasty. Maybe that was part of the plan. Maybe they were playing good cop, bad cop. Or maybe that was Orpheus being Orpheus, and Michael just using the situation. So that question lingered kind of in my mind.
And I think to that point as well, Greg, and this is a bigger point that I wanted to ask people, which it kind of leads into. So at the point in which Lance Bishop has given control or released, broken through the firewall, or however we turn around and term it, so that his memories are now available and have been uploaded, as he disconnects from, Michael Bishop turns around and says to Orpheus 1 and 2, right, now you have my permission. And they get a gleam in their eye, like they're, I don't know, and I'm just like, hang on a minute, are we now saying, and this was the broader question, because a lot of the novel talks about, mechanical processors or processors mimicking what could or could not be emotion. So are we now saying, or is this book suggesting that they feel emotion?
They definitely, yeah. I see where you're coming from, because there was very much a perhaps resentment from them throughout the book, with the focus that Bishop was getting off of Michael, off of father. So I very much can see where you're coming from, and I imagine they all, regardless of how dedicated or perhaps enslaved they were to Bishop, to Michael Bishop, I think they probably have whatever processes or whatever algorithms, whatever truths passed towards the androids, the artificial people, feeling emotion. But there was definitely emotion in them. It was the flip side of what Bishop had, where Bishop's focused on family, on love, on happiness, on positive memories and stuff like that. These guys fucking loathe Bishop and the chance they get when they are let off their leash to torture our favorite Bishop. There is emotion there, but it is negative emotion. It is hatred. It is sheer fucking hatred and jealousy of him, undoubtedly.
I completely agree with everything Aaron said there. Yeah, the sadistic emotional aspect of the twins are very, very apparent. And again, compared to other media where there is a bigger question of, can androids even mimic emotions? Can they display something that's convincing enough to pass for emotion, the Turing test, etc., etc.? In this universe, I think that's a long time from the David models, even given that they can pass for emotional representation, and with the type of sophistication, I do believe that they consider that they feel. Philosophically, what isn't emotion? Complex question, but I do believe that they can feel in a similar representing sense that we can in the alien universe. So if Bishop can feel love, remorse, dedication, etc., that opens the box for free androids to feel evil emotions, to feel the sadistic tendencies, the love of torture. So yeah, I do believe it's very, very apparent with the orifices.
Well, speaking about David, remember that Walter says it was the David model's overly emotional sort of state that made him people feel uncomfortable around him. So perhaps it's not so much androids' abilities to feel emotion as it is to hide them. Just a random throw out there for you.
Yeah, and I mean we've seen that debate even from Alien Covenant with David's debates with Walter, where David's like, "Oh, I know better. You think you can't feel, like I'm further along than you, and I know you can." Um, and we could definitely see David's emotional outbursts and stuff in Covenant. So yeah, that is another factor. The Alien universe with synthetics that's interesting is there's the premise that they can't feel, but actually they're so advanced that they can. And then by the time we get to Call, that's kind of obvious.
Yeah, because I think this, I think in this novel, and I know it's been broached in other media before, which is that he can learn behaviors that means he can fit in and make people feel less uncomfortable with the fact that he is. But that's the reason that he's doing it, if that makes sense. That's the reason that he's showing certain behaviors or certain mannerisms or certain tics or anything else, or mimicking emotions, is so that people, human people or people, feel more comfortable around him and he's more likely to be accepted. Whereas, and I think that's been done for a really long time, but this is maybe the first time where you've heard that internalized monologue of how he's running through things. I think there's one just after the officers have been dealt with. That sword, I've got lots of feelings about that sword, but not for right now. Yeah, I'll see you, Greg. So when the officers are dealt with, they're just about to take off, and I think he turns around to Carrie because he feels an unsteady. His hands are trembling, and he feels like his processes are running too fast. So he's talking about something that's a physical reaction, while he's also talking about something that's like a synthetic person, a process that's running. And he turns around to Carrie and he says, "Is this what fear feels like?" Or he says, "Well, I don't understand what's happening." She says, "You're feeling fear." Something around there. So again, but is it that he's just now, with all the list that I reeled off of all the extra things that Michael Bishop had programmed with, is he just now much better or able to process quicker and more effectively how people would react and how they would show emotions, or is he actually feeling them? I think it's interesting. I don't know whether there's an answer, but I quite liked the way in which they kind of showed it both ways in this book.
I don't think there is an answer, and I think that's part of the point, isn't it? You have to consider these questions and what you think about them. And that's science fiction when it's being good.
Yeah, and that's like, I said I like this book, and it's one of the reasons why.
Did you want to talk about the sword thing? Whatever it is that you've got about the sword?
I'm going to let Greg take it because I've just talked a lot, but I have feelings.
No. Please, you first. Start, Sarah. I will comment later, but I want to see what you think first.
When the sword is first brought in, obviously it's a beautiful sword that's on display, and he keeps talking about this sword being there and how beautiful it is, and it's got fish on it. And Michael Bishop says that he's programmed him with these blade skills, and I'm thinking, all right, so that sword's going to come up then. Here we go. And what do you know? The sword comes up and he's wielding it around, and even though he says that he's not a combat model android, suddenly he seems to be a combat model android, even though he says again later that he isn't. And then, of course, somehow this blade manages the impossible that bullets can't do and pierces the carapace of an alien. I'm sorry, it frustrated me. It's one of the things that I didn't like and I thought was unnecessary. But I'll
Go ahead, Greg.
Well, I'll connect with that. I agree with Sarah's opinion mostly. My situation was, in reading other people's opinions, the muscled up bishop along with the sword wielding katana was one of the first things I found out, and hearing those things on paper was one of the things that put me off this book. I was like, what the hell is going on with this? And of course, the first thing that popped in my mind was, does it put on any shades? Is this complete Kenner version or something? Is this maybe a Kenner homage or something that I just don't know? So yeah, that sounds completely ridiculous. And yeah, it wouldn't have hurt the story if it was left out. But the thing about Michael being this arrogant and posh rich guy having a katana there seems completely fine. And then Chekhov's gun, Bishop in a scene to use it would be okay. But yeah, with the emphasis on, yeah, you're programmed, you have knife combat skills, okay, that's passable. But yeah, the final thing, the final part of the story, were what Sarah said, that when using a katana to pierce the alien, oh god, I generally hate when you use knives or swords to just casually pierce through alien skin that deflects small arms. To use it, I always hated that. I mean, first, number one, katanas aren't really great swords for piercing. There are other swords that are better for that. A knife would be a bit better there. But okay, even if it cut a little bit, that would be okay. But no, using it to kill a whole alien with one thrust, and I hate when that comes up. And that's come up a few times. I mean, I just remember the novelization of Nightmare Asylum. Maybe it was even in the comic, but yeah.
Where he
Also,
chops off the head.
yeah, that was horrible.
and I know chopping is different. That's to Greg's point. It's the stabbing, especially as about 10 pages before, Apone was ineffectively trying to stab it. Now I know that Bishop the android is now Rocky from
whichever Rocky.
Rocky 4. I realized that now, but it was still like, you've just said that this knife is ineffective, and I think it broke. So, and then this a weapon that is not designed for a stabbing motion, slicing yes, stabbing no, apparently in the hands of a non-combat model is absolutely fatal to an alien.
People don't seem to like katanas in the Alien universe, Aaron.
I think from a thematic point of view, you could have some fun with the emphasis of, the beauty and the craftsmanship of a weapon such as that, which you then have compared to like the Giger-esque beauty of the alien itself. There is perhaps some comparison to be made there, which is completely absent in this, and it's just me talking about.
They say it, Aaron. No, they say it. So
they compare it to the alien.
Yeah, so when Bishop stabs the alien, he mutters or says in front of Carrie, it's something along the lines of, such a waste of a thing of beauty. And in the narration, you can't decide. She can't figure out whether he's talking about the alien or the weapon.
No, that's fair. But I'm thinking more in terms of making that quite, a thematic point of the beauty of the aliens as this deadly object compared to the craftsmanship that goes into like the blade. And yes, it is a small moment, and you mentioning it there reminds me, but it's not a big enough moment for me to have to remember that. But I do like this. I mean, it's something Alex White talked about when I spoke to them many years ago. Is this fascination that synthetics have with the aliens? So that is a small little moment. I was like, yeah, I like that for that kind of thing. But
Well, they do lightly touch on that as well. I think this is like permeated your brain without you realizing, because they do that numerous times in the book as well. Because Lance Bishop will talk about being enthralled and then being terrified of feeling that way because he knows it should be loathsome. So they scatter that out through it. I mean, I hear you, and it isn't right in your face and everything, but they do smatter that through. You're right.
And I do enjoy that.
And P.S. Instead of a katana, using any medieval mace type of weaponry, you can be encased in full thick metal. It'll bring a bad day to you. So if somebody wants to go melee on an alien, bring a mace. A metal baseball bat club would be realistically more effective than a katana.
Specifically the katana, yeah. Because I mean, even in the films we've seen, the harpoon, so we know physical stuff does injure them at least, or pierce them in some way or another. But yeah, that's a fair point. So some very, very strong criticism of this type of weapon used here from Greg and Sarah. I can't say it was something I really considered at all, to be honest. I'm curious to know why you guys are so knowledgeable on the blades now. Do I need to fear something here?
I have one just tucked over there.
Do you really?
Yeah, it's
Is it a thing of beauty?
Replica. No, it's not. I mean, I didn't go full hog on buying the one that I did, but it's a replica of Bill's sword from Kill Bill.
Oh, okay, that's a film I've not seen in years, decades.
I know about these things for the nerdiest of nerdiest reasons. Exactly because of Alien and Alien versus Predator, I got into, and because I'm a scientifically kind of minded a person, I like realism and stuff in my stories. So I went on a exploration and research adventure throughout the years, where everything I've come to know about firearms and melee weapons is melee weapons, because I like to know how would predator weaponry work on Alien, and firearms to see how that would realistically work on armor and stuff. So yeah.
No, that's fair. And Sarah's showing off the blade here for our audio listeners. You muted, Sarah.
Yes, this is my my replica. I do have downstairs as well. I've got a replica of Ramirez's sword from Highlander, because I am a big geek.
You
so
very much like your Highlander, don't you?
I love it, yeah. But I do have a sword on a few books on samurai, just generally, and they go through the different swords and what their purposes were, and they had different ones for different methods. So they did have a smaller one, which would be used for a stabbing motion, but that wasn't the design of the katana or its purpose.
There we go. We've learned something about Japanese blades today, folk.
I personally didn't mind its use. I mean, you'd have to think a blade coming from the Yutani family would be pretty good blade, right? And yeah, I'm primed for it a bit with Alien versus Predator as well, like the Capcom arcade. You have what's the lady's name? Aaron.
Lieutenant something.
Yeah.
Kura something sour.
Yeah, she's got a samurai sword and she's slicing up aliens left and right. So
it's got precedence in law, guys. God, stop being so nitpicky.
Well, no. So there was a. Oh, hang on. What was it called? A wakizashi is the short sword. So that's the smaller one, which they would pierce with, as opposed to a slash, which would be the katana.
Sarah with the swords and the dog tags, she's the most prepared out of all of us.
Yeah. Proper bringing the props with you today. Have you got a little model of Bishop's top half somewhere? No, You're gonna have to.
No, I just have the little cuddly one, but I am looking
Oh,
for.
yeah.
I do want the diorama of it. That's one of the ones that I'm saving for. I want that one. There is one that you can get. I can't remember the manufacturers of it now, but there is one that you can get. But I do have the little cuddly one.
There's been some impressive fan replicas of Bishop's top half. I think one of the it might have been the Colonial Marines event that I went to when Sega was promoting them. They had somebody pretending to be half an android on a box or a crate or something that was obviously intended to be Bishop, but it was. I do enjoy seeing people's cosplay of that or replicas of that. Isn't there a very infamous picture of Lance being presented with a similar replica and him signing it? I'm sure that's on the internet somewhere. Sarah with the plushie.
Oh god, that plushie looks wonderful.
He looks so terrified.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one before.
I've never
Yeah,
seen this.
it's pretty gross, but and it does go all the way around, and it does have his watch on as well. So, but alas, no dog tags.
Let Sarah down. That one has.
Sarah's completely catering to our video audience.
I'll be here all week.
Did anybody have any other points they wanted to bring up about the book?
Has anybody noticed the line when Michael is explaining to Bishop about uploading his memories and how he wants to do it in a different way to be more faithful? How he mentions some parts of his younger life, mentioning siblings. So that means Michael has siblings, which means we can have not only his AI consciousness, but the whole Michael Bishop family line in future installations.
No, please no more.
Yeah, that just
please
joking.
no more. I know, but I'm just like no more, please.
As far as I'm concerned, Bishop's still just a nod to Charles Bishop Whalen. Michael Bishop was just Bishop too.
I did have two, if that's all right, that we didn't cover off. So and they're both, maybe they're a bit nitpicky. And again, I love this book.
Well, I do have a nitpick as well, actually, after you.
Number one was when Lance Bishop goes dashing off to go and find Michael Bishop, and he's cocooned, and he talks about 7 eggs. There's no mention of unhatched eggs at any point. Where have they come from? Because we assumed that it's come over on the Chinese vessel, and that's where they are because they were there and everything else. But all the eggs were hatched, as far as we were aware. There was none left over because they had to count how many facehuggers or how many chest bursters they could see. So where did 7 eggs come from that were where Michael was cocooned?
Well, on the flip side of this, then, is perhaps they had more than just the number of eggs that were required for the Vietnamese, and the aliens went and fetched the spare ones.
A reserve batch, yeah.
I like that.
But I never noticed that, Sarah. That's a good point. That completely went over my head. That could theoretically be a bit of a strange continuity thing because, as Aaron said, yeah, they would have to find the eggs, which, yeah, they probably can find their babies, smell them. But still, yeah, let's go. Egg mothing,
even if you're with that theory, yeah, it would have taken way too long.
Well, I mean,
so yeah, that is strange.
It's a fair nitpick. What's number 2?
So number 2 was Michael Bishop is explaining to Lance Bishop what happened to Ripley on the surface of the planet. So they're having the discussion of the fact that Ripley is dead, and he talks about Michael Bishop, talks about how he knows that Ripley was left alone when attacked by the xenomorph. He specifically says that's why he's barking on about pheromones, that she was infected or impregnated, and the alien left her alone. I don't understand how he would know that.
Morse. I bet you could reason that through Morse, because
Morse,
she at least tells Dylan. So what's not to reason that perhaps in the conversing elsewhere.
I thought that was a bit.
No, I see where you're coming from. I just think you can fansplain that.
Okay.
Morse has seen that in the furnace.
Yes, true. Because
I just
So-
figured
Dylan's
he
dragon.
couldn't see because of the hotness and the steam is out because it was everywhere, wasn't it? I just thought that he just thought it went for Dylan as opposed to her. But maybe okay. Those are my two. Those are my two.
But it is potentially iffy, yeah.
Yeah. I have a problem with the amount of times this is nitpick again, and it's always been a thing that bothers me, and it is terminology. So one of the things I find irritating in the original Steve Perry stuff is the use of calling them like blasters. The guns are blasters, and again, I know that's because Perry was just copying Mark Verheiden's terminology in the script, and we blame it on Verheiden, whatever. But it then became a problem for me in Colony War, where it talked about them being pulse guns and firing lasers and bullshit like that. Fucking. But in this one, there was a flick between them being referred to as pulse rifles and pulse guns that kind of irritated me a little bit. Like, I know there's explanations for this. Pulse is the action that activates that fires the round, and I suppose technically you could call them pulse guns, but pulse rifles is such a synonymous term with the Aliens franchise that it mildly irritated me just a little bit. Tiny little nitpick, and that's my last complaint with the book, I'll be honest. But
it did. I did notice that as well. It does irk a bit, but as you say, logically speaking, yeah, a pulse gun, a pulse rifle would be a pulse gun. Terminology is not a problem there, but it did give me the same reminiscence to Colony War. I was just fretting the whole time. Please don't mention any laser fire or anything. Thankfully that wasn't the case, but it did put me on edge a bit there. It's a small thing, but yeah.
All right, well that's it. I'm tapped out. Sarah's tapped out. Greg, are you?
I have only one more nitpick, and it's not a big crucial thing, and it might seem to listeners that we're maybe focusing on some on bad things, but at least from my perspective, I really loved the novel. But since there was such a minority of things that in my personal case I didn't like, it's easier to single them out than talk about everything else I loved. I loved the company agent who was tracking Michael Bishop, a different kind of portrayal of a company agent. Seeing in company fights like that about between personnel, loved it. I can talk about that for days. But as far as my final nitpick goes, it is a kind of strange story decision that I believe could have been done differently. At the end, when Bishop defeats the orifices and goes with the rest of the Marines, we're heading out, we're escaping, and then just 3 times actually I counted consecutively he stopped. First was like, oh, what's this feeling? When Carrie Lee went, yeah, that's fear. Second was I don't know, was something else. But a third time he stopped them again, and he was like, oh, I have to go back for Michael. And they were like, we spent so many people, so many lives trying to get you, and you want to do what? And he was, he's my father, but I have to go see him. I kind of understand his point, but from the Marines' perspective, they lost so much. They should not have let him any type of allowance to go there. Yeah, the smart gunner was very against it, and Carrie Lee is more sympathetic, but even for her, that was a bit much. And I realized why then they put Morse in that position, because he's the plan B, he's the consolation prize. Yeah, if something happens to Bishop, we have Morse, so it'll be okay. But no, you spent so much trying to get not only to save him as a person, but even that, his information and his personhood. Why are you letting him go? And then he's like, oh yeah, I'll be back quickly. And so that was like a real U-turn. Like, why did we need this? Because they could have simply been going, and going through one of the rooms that uh, was that where Michael was in an adjacent room, and they say, "Oh, the aliens are near. We have to go around." And he's near, and they say, "Oh, I'll be here in 5 minutes. I just want to see what happens," or something like that. I just want to talk to him. And then he goes like, "I didn't know what was I going to save you or kill you, but I'm going to leave you." So like, why'd you go there? I know he wanted to see how
No.
it felt and stuff, but that was silly.
That was another thing. He's like, "Oh, I didn't know what I was gonna do. I just had to come see you." And it's just like, y'all are trying to get off of the ship with your lives here. Like, this is not the time for this. But yeah, so I get what you mean. I agree.
So just one that I did think of, and it's actually about the ending of the book. What did people think of the epilogue?
Oh, you stole my last question.
Great minds.
So yeah, I mean, as we wrap up, then the book leaves us on a very obvious cliffhanger, potential sequel bait, set up to continue exploring and playing with the character of Michael Bishop. I don't know. I don't know if I liked it or not. I'll be honest. Mostly because what we got, we didn't get anything really with the aliens. Let's be honest. We know that the pheromones fucked up and he can't control it. And I think that's when Michael Bishop's a little bit at his most boring in the book, is when he turns full villain mode at the end of it.
Mustache twirling.
Yeah, when he gets mustache twirly. So I found him more interesting when he was trying to seduce Bishop and get this information, and when it was potentially something a bit more interesting with the aliens. You could potentially do something interesting with the idea of the pheromones and controlling them, but it's him wanting to control them to be an army and to be the queen that is a little bit to me. Depends what the next person does. I'll be honest. Uh, Immortality, questions of self, and the general Blade Runner esque elements of of science fiction that have sort of seeped a bit more into Alien of late are still interesting to me. So him existing as this digital entity is it's potential for fun, it's potential for exploration, but it's still kind of stuff we've already seen. Adam brought up earlier Davis, and of course this concept of consciousness and transfer is something that the TV show is going to explore. So it's not wholly unique, really.
More recently, May as well.
Yeah, of course, in Inferno's Fall.
Or the upcoming one.
Everybody wants to explore the same elements at the minute, which can potentially become a bit, shoulder shruggy. While it's always interesting to see different people's perspectives on the same subjects, I don't know. I still like Bishop. I still think he's potential for fun, but I don't want to see everybody still repeating the same sort of elements and themes and stuff like that. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
I would say, yeah, I agree with the most part about the part that where a lot of media in the alien universe is now exploring the potential of digital consciousness, where it be before it was from the synthetic side, where yeah, why not have them upload their consciousness and be just like that for a longer time. But on the other hand, um, now we have Michael Bishop, who was an egotistical person, human person with godhood issues, has now transitioned over to the digital. True that that can get maybe old really fast, since we've had a few entries with that. The reason why this book was very good to me was because the lead up to that point was very interesting, and the questions and methodology being explored there was thought-provoking. But now going further, you reuse it if somebody would to use his character, wouldn't be then anything super special in that regard. I feel like it was done so that future writers could have a whack at Michael Bishop, but if any entries in the RPG probably maybe have mentions of him or something like that, so in future could be, oh, it's not that Bishop, this one bleeds white, this one is synthetic, and however many you destroy, they are just copies or a direct link. His main consciousness is in another mainframe, so they can create a longer lasting secret enemy there. I do agree that with at the end he was a bit more mustache twirly, and in a sense he has the same problem that David 8 had in Prometheus. A lot more interesting to me personally, when he was a lot more nuanced, and his mannerisms were more subtle and easy being obedient, easy doing his own conniving plans, than in Covenant, when all kind of egotistical maniac, master twirling villain, psycho, when it went fully in that version. So yeah, at the same time, at the end of the book, yeah, Michael Bishop kind of fell through that, but it was a relatively small part, so I don't give it that much of a problem. I am on two fences about it, because yeah, it was a very kind of thematically, in one sense, cool ending, that he was arrogant, he thought he could control all these creatures, and then he got what it was coming to him. But at the same time, it was undone, so you can play with him if you still want, which kind of undoes his arrogance there. But at the same time, throughout the whole novel, it was being explored, creating that digital consciousness, creating an upload. So yeah, he was thinking of a backup plan in that sense. So you can also say it like that. He's a man who thinks ahead with these things. And the funny thing enough is that as this version now, as digital consciousness, if he goes into a synthetic recreation of his body, he will be a lot more easily, he can move a lot easier amongst the aliens now than in his flesh form with bad pheromones. Now he can just go around them. He still won't probably be able to command them, but he can go and pet them if he wants. I mean, I don't know what can be futurely done to them, but that is a bit kind of, yeah, it was interesting, but I do have a bit fear as to what future writers will do. I'm more though worried with literal Lance Bishop Musley now, what he will do in future installments. I'm more afraid people will reuse him in bad ways.
Adam?
I mean, overall, I was more positive about this book. I'd probably be like a 7. I just feel like there was a lot of setup with characters, and then it felt like we just kind of rushed everything at the end. It felt like this book could have been a bit longer with how much was set up. Either that or just focus on less characters. But overall, I did like the characters. I did like the different factions at play, the ships, the action. The writing was great, and the description of the xenomorphs and the scary scenes I thought were really good. So yeah, overall it was mostly positive for me. Did have its issues, as we went over, but if you're a fan, if you like aliens, I'd still recommend it for sure. I don't know if I'd want to see a continuation though.
Yeah, the story is done.
Go on, Sarah.
Yeah,
Wrap us up.
I think I'm in a similar place. I, being the Bishop fan that I am, I loved spending more time with Bishop, as in Lance Bishop. I enjoyed the concept of his evil twin, or Psycho Michael Bishop. But when it came to the epilogue, it gave me pause. Mainly because I thought Michael Bishop could have died. Do you know what I mean? It's the son outliving the father. Michael Bishop being dead and gone, cocooned by aliens, there was a slight opening there that maybe the pheromones would have worked. But you've got Lance Bishop, who's come away with this knowledge of aliens, who's got this curiosity with just wanting to be a Marine, and not wanting any control or benefit or any reason to exert that knowledge apart from perhaps for good reasons. So theoretically speaking, you've now created a super good with a super bad, on two sides of the mirror. But in all honesty, I don't know whether I'd want to read that book. I am content with the time that we got to spend with Lance Bishop. If he appeared again in later novels in some way, shape, or form, I'd be happy to see him. But I don't need any more Psycho Bishop. So for me, the epilogue felt, at least they wrapped it up. Do you know what I mean? I suppose that was one way of doing it, but I'd have left Michael in a cocoon, did he, didn't he? And I feel as if the same could have been achieved.
That's fair. But at the end of it all, we're still positive about this book. Yeah, thumbs up all around.
Adore it.
I
Adore
loved
it.
it.
I just wanna end with, since I said a bunch of negatives here. Just wanna end on a positive note. The action was superbly written. In quite a few novels, I haven't been able to imagine the action so well. Love that. The beginning Marine scenes with Carrie Lee and the rest. I don't remember last time I felt like, yeah, this is how I imagine an opening scene with new Marines, how it would be. I actually loved the number of characters. I love that so much was going on. Yeah, it could have been maybe longer, but I personally love how much is happening. It felt like there was a lot all over the place. It was very dynamic, so that worked for me. Just some positives.
Yeah, I agree. It did very much feel quite vast, but not in an overwhelming way. I know Sarah said that it was perhaps too many characters earlier, but I never found myself unable to keep track of people. And that's a problem I've had in some of the books. Sea of Sorrows in particular
Wasn't
is
Prototype like that too? Kind of.
I don't remember it being a problem for Prototype. I always think of Sea of Sorrows with not being able to keep track of everybody. But I felt like there was a lot of distinctive differences in personalities and characters that helped me keep track of such a large cast. So yeah, I'm very much in agreement with you there, Greg. I think pacing wise as well, it was very well paced. I was never bored. That was always a problem with. Sorry, heard something there. That is always a problem with larger books potentially, but Napper did a good job of keeping it moving at a good clip, which I always very much appreciate. And yeah, I enjoyed it. Nitpicks aside, it is very much science fiction. It is very much a question asking, not necessarily answer giving kind of thing in a non-frustrating way that is good science fiction. Just
And
perhaps
I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think that my enjoyment of the book, I mean, I've read it, as I said, I've read it 3 times. And I think that this conversation has made me almost like appreciate and enjoy the book more, because I think this chat is, I think it's just added layers to it. And so even with the nitpicks, we've all got kind of the same ones. I mean, I know I didn't enjoy so many characters so much, but I think we're pretty much aligned. But we're still about saying this is a great book.
Definitely
Completely
best
agree.
Titans done in a few years.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Zala, horror's out, my friend.
All right.
Take us home.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the AvP Galaxy podcast. If you'd like to see our main hub of activity, check out our website, avpgalaxy.net, where you can find all the latest news on the franchises as well as editorials. And you can also interact with other fans on our message boards. We're also on all the major social channels: Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Big thank you to our Patreon supporters. And if you'd like to support what we do at AvP Galaxy, check out patreon.com/.
Should we do our list? I think I promised at the end of the last discussion with
Yeah,
the
what
list.
what are the new ones we have for last month?
Well, let me. Oh, Aaron, you've lost it. Where have you put it? Let me just read out everybody because I think we haven't done that for a
We'll do a full readout.
teeny while. Patreon supporters. There we go. You know what? Can I add this? No, fuck it. So our tier 1 level are facehuggers and young bloods. We have JF Boyvin, Steve Patterson, Rob Harvey, Colin McNamara, Steve Spires, Mike DeLeonardo, and The Motion Comic. At our tier 2 level, which is Warriors and Hunters, we have Anon, Chris Osbrooks, Christian Matsker, Darkness, Javar Wayman, Josh Cambrian, Sinon So Geki High, Sizzy Bubbles, Swine Rider, The Batman, Zach Walker and Coleman. And at our tier 3 level, which is our Patreons / Elder, we have Acid Rain One.
Praetorians.
What the fuck did I just say?
You said Patreons.
Fucking moron. Absolute moron. We have
They are
Praetorians and Elders. Jesus Christ, man. I swear I'm just getting stupider. Acid Rain 161, Bending Light, Tom Painter, myself, Hunter Goetz, Lucas.
Getz.
Getz.
Yeah.
Sarah Evans joining us today for a natter. Rebecca Herbst, Xeno Hunter 5669, Xeno Pred Alien, Zarnold Quigley, Xeno Alpha 007, Darren, oh god, Kuchu, Christopher Isaacs, and Darwin's Girl.
What about Rob Harvey? We missed Rob Harvey.
He must have dropped off at some point. I have been removing.
He's still in the chat.
Oh shit! No, Rob, what level are you?
So that is one of the features you get if you are one of our Patreon supporters.
I miss you. That's one of the features we get Patreon supporters.
Is you get to watch some of our episodes live when we're not doing interviews.
What about the quiz?
Oh
yeah. We got a pop quiz, right?
Greg, before we go, okay, we're not quite finished yet. We are going to be doing a quiz.
An epilogue to the epilogue.
Indeed.
Real quick, let's put up Rob Harvey's last comment, Aaron, because he may have jetted off. Just says, great discussion, everyone. I had a handful of issues with the book, but keen to give it another go with the Audible version.
Okay. Thank you for joining us as well, Rob. And you know, like I said, that's a perk of supporting us is getting to watch these live and interact with us if you so wish. So yeah, and this was in place of our live stream today this week. This was recorded on a Sunday because we've all been nightmares to schedule for May, and they ended up having to be on a slot we'd normally reserve for live streaming. But we got there. Greg, come on then.
Game show time, right?
Take us away.
Okay. I wrote a silly intro. It's extremely corny, but next time it'll be more thematically appropriate for the alien universe. But this is what I got for now. Just a bit of fun. Hear ye, weary travelers and viewers from afar. Come on down to Alien vs. Predator Town, where we'll be testing our decaying memories and proving our love for the franchise. For if we really cared about all of this, we wouldn't possibly forget even the smallest details, right? Right. Jokes aside, of course, this is all just for laughs and lighthearted fun. Let's start with the first question. Something a bit light and easier to start us off.
I love this. Don't change it. Honestly, I've smiled ear to ear. Greg, you're a genius.
Thank you. Okay, the first question. In Aliens, when Burke's plan fails and is being yelled at by the squad, right before the creatures cut the power, Hudson says, I say we grease this right now.
Fun of a
What was the exact phrase he used? write it down or whatever, like the exact
Wait,
phrase.
we need buzzers or something. Like,
This isn't a
No,
go first question.
It's not a go first. It's who guesses correctly. The others will be multiple choice.
gotcha.
So
Okay.
you can just write it down, or if you already remember, say when everybody's ready.
I'm good. Sarah's good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, let's start off with Adam because I think he remembers the exact phrase.
Rat fuck son of a bitch.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I have.
Yeah. Well, it's an easier one, but I remember some years before when people were in the quoting thread, they missed one of the words, either rat or something, and I was like, it's such a memorable line. You can't miss it. So yeah. Okay. Now, we started off like that, but while we're with Hudson already, let's remember how he's famously good with words. How many times did he say the word fuck in Aliens? Was it? Of course, I don't expect you to remember the exact number. That's why this is multiple choice.
That's good.
Is it A, 11, B, 18, C, 25, or D, 108?
Okay.
Let's give Sarah a second. Okay, before I reveal this, the funny thing is 3 of these 4 numbers are actual real numbers and related somewhat. I will tell you later. Okay, so let's start with Sarah.
B.
B, 18. Okay, what did Aaron choose?
I went for C25.
What did Adam choose?
I also went for C.
The correct answer is B, 18. Now, the interesting trivia about this. So Hudson said 18. Said fuck 18 times. The total amount of fucks given was 25, but that's by everyone. So Hudson was 18 out of 25. Now, the other real number is not 11. It's 108. There are sites for parental guidance and stuff that count the amount of curse words throughout entire films. And when you count everything, even goddamn and other similar words, there's 108 in Aliens. So yeah.
And do we know what the limit is? Was that like at the limits of the number of curse words that could be used, or?
I don't think there's a limit for R-rated films with
Okay.
words.
I will just tell you this: that is not the movie with the most amount of curse words. So that'll be for a next quiz. Okay. Since we are Alien versus Predator, it would be only fitting for us to give our favorite intergalactic hunters some well-deserved attention as well. What was the first appearance of a predator munching down on a human? Was it A, Predator Big Game, the comic, B, The Predator movie, C, Predator Cold War, or D, Predator Bad Blood? If you want me to reveal again, if you need to write it down, just say. So, Predator Big Game,
one.
The Predator, Predator Cold War, or Predator Bad Blood? So the first appearance of a predator munching down on a human.
I only remember it in one of them, but I can see it happening in another one.
This is a tricky one for multiple reasons.
Okay.
Have you decided?
Yep.
Okay. Let's start with Aaron this time.
I can only remember it in The Predator, but I can totally see it happening in Bad Blood. And
what is your final answer?
I've gone for Bad Blood.
Okay. What is Adam's pick?
Cold War.
Okay. What is Sarah's pick?
C.
C, Cold War. Okay. So the correct answer is Predator Bad Blood.
Woo!
That was the first. That was the first appearance where directly you see munching human beings. Yeah, it's most memorable, of course, in our recent entry, the Predator movie, where Upgrade during the night ambush just whoop, wishes one of the guys and shoots them off. Predator Cold War was just a red herring. I don't have no memory of this memory.
I thought I thought the red herring would be Bad Blood because that's kind of the obvious answer. Like, oh, the crazy predator is going to munch on somebody, right? Like, so I would have guessed that. But
half red herring, I don't know, do you call it a pink herring or whatever, is Predator Big Game, because there you see the aftermath of the predator eating some type of meat there, but not human and not directly. So you just see the aftermath only. Okay. I hope you're keeping scores of who is how much, because
everyone remember your points.
Yeah. The last question for tonight. While we're with Predator Bad Blood, everything's connected. In terms of Yautja on Yautja action, just giving Aaron's favorite term here. In terms of Yautja on Yautja action, was it the third time? Was it B, the second time? C, the first time? Or D, the fifth entry in the entire lore to do such a thing? So we're taking in comics, novels, everything.
Bad Blood was mid-90s.
Don't say it out loud. Don't help the others, Aaron.
What was the option? Sorry.
I'll repeat. So A, was it A, the third time? Was it B, the second time? Was it C, the first time? Or D, the fifth entry in the lore to do Predator versus Predator action?
Okay. Oh, actually think about it now because of that. Okay.
So we're taking in everything, Predator, Alien versus Predator, novelizations, comics, video games, whatever.
Novelizations?
Everything. I don't know if
video
something...
games.
That makes it fucking trickier. Okay. Fuck it. I'm good.
Okay. Do we have your answers? Let's start off with Sarah.
Blind guess. I don't know this one. I'm gonna go A.
Okay. Let's go with Adam.
I'm gonna say it's the fifth time.
Okay, let's go with Aaron.
I've likewise gone fifth.
The true answer is the blind guess A. It is the third time chronologically because
you threw me off saying the novelizations. I was like AvP, Blood Time, not Blood Time. Yeah, the one with short.
Chronologically, it should have been. There was a scene in the Predator 2 novelization, and then in the Aliens vs. Predator comics, and then Bad Blood came out.
Well, what about the first AvP game on Super Nintendo? Didn't it have a Predator on Predator boss fight? Maybe
you played that through recently.
Is it the arcade? Is it the arcade?
No, this one was before that. This was the first Alien and Predator game, which was the Super Nintendo one.
What year did that come out?
Let's see.
It was early 90s. That was 93.
Now I have to check. Was it before Predator Bad Blood?
But I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't even know if you fight another Predator in that one.
1993. Apparently, the final battle was against an alien queen.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
I know you fight.
There's no Predator versus Predator action.
Yeah, in the Capcom one there is. You fight against the Bad Blood Predators, but that one was. Let's see.
That one was later. Than Bad Blood comic.
That one was 94. Yeah.
think Bad Blood was 94. Look at this. Adam's already been like, nope, I disagree. I disagree with this. The Quizmaster.
It's close. It's close, Adam. You're very close. Bad Blood started in December of '93 and went through to '94. So very close.
There are 2 predators you fight in that game. So
that was actually very close. Very tricky, but chronologically, it still stands. So the blind guess won that question. So what are your scores?
3 out of 4.
I don't think I got anything.
2. You did. You got Ratfuck, son of a bitch.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. So 1, 2, and 3. Is that it? Okay. Nice. So I need to tally that up somewhere so we can have a track record for.
We're gonna have an end of season. We'll get
Why
to
not?
Our final round.
Why not? And for the end of this quiz, I'd just like to give a shout out and special thanks to the folk over at Xenopedia who do amazing work and are a great place to find not only facts about anything Alien Predator or AvP, but also have an extremely interesting trivia section at the end of most of their entries that people forget to look at. Unfortunately, a lot of the time. They've been doing this for decades, and I'll be happy to be able to use some of their knowledge for adding inspiring and cross-referencing information for future quizzes. So for any viewers watching, you can also find a lot of interesting information there.
Indeed. Right, and thank you, Greg, for putting that together.
Oh, no problem. Extremely fun.
Although I think we're gonna. There might be some contesting going off soon of that last question.
Oh. Did you find something else, Aaron?
Well, no, I was like, well, there was the show. It's fine. We'll talk about it offline. We'll talk about it fine. It's fine.
We'll revise points if needed.
Aaron's going to straight up, well, actually, here in a minute.
But no, thank you. I do fucking enjoy the quiz. I'm glad you agreed to do them.
I find them very fun. If I have any mistakes, I will be more accurate and thorough or think of simpler, tricky questions.
No, it's fine. That was good. Yeah, I think we're done, aren't we? So thank you, everybody, for listening or watching. Thank you for everybody who's supporting us. Any comments, feel free to email podcast@avpgalaxy.net or post on the, if you're watching on YouTube, post down below, leave us comments. Or on the social areas that you find a link to these. Or hell, even on Spotify, I think you can leave comments on the episodes. And please do leave us reviews on the podcast overall, especially on iTunes and on Spotify. You know, it helps other people find us if you leave us ratings and reviews. Unless they're shit, then I don't want them. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. If you think we're a bunch of fucking morons, you can post that on there as well.
Then especially leave them then.
Yes, especially. But thank you, everybody. This has been Corporal Hicks,
RidgeTop,
Still Collating,
Sarah the Bishop Fangirl,
signing off.